Bore da croeso I gyfarfod brodd. Good morning and welcome everyone to the last public board meeting of the 22-23 financial year, which is always a busy meeting at the end of the year. So we've got a break in the morning session, then we'll have a lunch break, and we do need to come back after lunch, but I'm hoping we'll be finished by just before 3. As is usual practice, we're holding the meeting virtually via Zoom, and a recording of the meeting will be available on our YouTube channel shortly after the conclusion of the meeting. We do have simultaneous translation facilities available. That anyone who is watching the meeting today is not familiar with how to access that. If you hover your cursor over the screen, you'll see a globe with interpretation written over it. If you click on that and select here translation, you'll then get the translation feed through the meeting. I did need to make the board in public session aware that we've just completed a private board meeting where we were considering the link program, and the reasons it was held in private was due to commercial confidentiality, and abridged minutes of that meeting will be presented to the May public board meeting for information. Okay, so I apologies for absence. Just before that, with people who are joining us for any presentations who aren't members of the board, introduce themselves, please. And I will be welcoming this afternoon Nathan Couch and Darren Griffiths from Audit Wales, who'll be presenting for item 5.1. And I think at least Nathan is observing for the whole of the meeting. So welcome, Nathan, and see you later this afternoon. Apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies for absence, and looking around, I can't see that there are any. So thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I haven't received any declarations of interest prior to the meeting. Anyone indicate if anything's occurred to them since the papers went out? No, thank you very much indeed. If I move on to the consent agenda, which is a long agenda, so I hope Chris, please do pick me up if I miss something out or get something wrong as I go through this list. I don't think anyone has indicated in advance that they've got any issues to raise. If anyone has any issues to raise, do let us know, and we'll try and fit it in the agenda through the meeting. Okay, so if I could move through the consent agenda, the first thing then is I'm approving the minutes, item 2.1 from the board meeting held on the 26th of January. And I think given the length, if anyone does have a problem with anyone, if you shout, otherwise I'll assume agreement and approval. Approving the private abridged minutes.
Sorry, Simon. Sorry, Chair. Yep. There's an error on page 5 in the minutes where it says Digital Healthcare Wales have employed 5 GPs. We haven't employed 5 full-time GPs to work on this particular project. We've got a GP who's allocated to the program specifically, and then 3 other part-time GPs who are doing other things. They will be engaging in the app, but they're not specifically for that. So the word specifically needs to be removed, please.
Okay, if we can identify the number correctly in terms of the...
Yeah, I'll send it to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Ridian. Thank you for that. And it is, I've got my head down, so do shout. So I might miss a hand going up if anyone has got something. Approving the private abridged minutes, item 2.2 from the board meeting held on the 26th of January. Noting the action log, 3 actions are now complete and 1 action is underway. Noting the forward work plan. Approving the board cycle of business 23-24. Approving the annual committee and advisory group reports. Noting the board and committee effectiveness self-assessment. Good, thank you. Approving the annual review of standing orders and compliance report. Thank you. Approving the governance assurance framework review. Thank you. Approving the health and care standards annual assessment. Thank you. Approving the emergency planning annual report. Thank you. Approving the policy report. Thank you. Noting the item on the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and it's worth pointing out here that the big change here is around change of timescale. We thought we were going to fall under the aegis of the Act from the 1st of April 23, but that has now been moved. I think, Chris, I'm correct to say, to the 1st of April 24. Thank you. And then approving the gender pay gap annual report at item 2.14.
I had a comment on that, Simon.
Sure.
There's a legend in the document that says a percentage. It was showing the percentage split. It's actually numbers, so it just needs to be corrected.
So it either has to have a percentage sign, or the numbers need to be indicated that they're numbers, not percentages.
Basically, the legend and the figure needs to be consistent.
Thank you, Rowan. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for that. As I say, very long consent agenda items today. And then if I move on to the main agenda and my report, there's just a couple of items from the written report which you've all had a chance to read, but please do pick up on any issues if you want to ask any questions or make any comments of ones that I don't highlight. The first is the digital program governance review. We understand that now that we're probably within 24 hours, 48 hours of that actually being delivered in its final form by Steve Coombe, who was undertaken the review. We will then and I will be in discussion, others have been in discussion with the CDO in Welsh Government as to how then that is progressed. I'll be sending a copy to the Minister, but I want to coordinate the timing of that with how it's been handled internally by Mike Emery, the CDO's office. And then depending on the outcome of that, from coming back from any decisions that might be made, we are actively thinking about, and indeed have had some preliminary discussions with Audit Wales around the nature of governance we will need to put in place that is different to that we currently operate. But that was obviously to be dependent on any change in the governance arrangements following the review. And the second bit I wanted to highlight was the first Chairs Away Day that the Minister ran week before last now. The important thing for us, which is that I asked for, and it was agreed that we had an agenda item, the first agenda item, it turned out to be on digital, which was kicked off, introduced by Mike Emery, the relatively new CDO appointment, and very helpfully it was clear that both Mike and ourselves were very much on the same page in terms of the future needs and direction of travel around digital in Wales, and I took the opportunity to highlight some critical things, cybersecurity being one, the nature of investment that's going to be needed to be bringing NHS Wales as a system up to where it needs to be, and then the nature of investment that needs to be that we need to have to take us to the next level of what we want to do. I think the other thing, which is, and Claire and Ivan and others have been instrumental in achieving this, is the way in which the digital directors of digital across the system and ourselves are very much working together now to identify common approaches to looking at need and gaps and technical debt, and very much on the same page, which I think is hugely encouraging, and lots of very helpful views expressed around the table, and a common agreement around single instance interoperability and only doing it one system for the whole of Wales was clearly something the Minister emphasized, and also everyone around the table was very much on that page as well, and a recognition that that significant transformation can be achieved through digital, but recognizing the challenge of having the resources available to be able to do that, because the benefit might well come a little bit downstream rather than absolutely immediate. So it's very encouraging to have that on the agenda, very encouraging that everyone's on the same page around the importance of digital transformation, but very much in the context of some of the other things we discussed through the day around the huge financial challenge we've got arriving in a few days in the 23-24 year, with virtually all boards, I think by the end of today, having, as we will have done, signed off our IMTPs, which if you wish to spend the time, if you go through those, you will be able to add up the total deficit that the health service system in Wales is anticipating in 23-24. So there was some hugely challenging things discussed in that meeting, but digital very much being at the forefront of a lot of the discussion around what solutions there may be. The other thing I'd just like to draw to your attention, and I've had a conversation with Ruth as vice chair, and we feel it would be really helpful to, from this meeting on, that this item would be identified as the chair and vice chair's report, so that there may well be things that Ruth wants to draw to people's attention, particularly in the context of the vice chair's peer group, for example, and our increased emphasis around primary community and mental health, with Sam Hall joining us. So that will give the opportunity for Ruth to put items written in the report, and then also if you want to highlight anything verbally in the meeting, Ruth, that gives you that opportunity as well. Those are the things I wanted to draw to your attention from the report and that slight amendment into the future. The other thing, the final thing in my report I did just need to bring to your attention is I need to ask the board to approve. The first time I've done this, it's not very common here, very common in health boards, that we've taken chairs actions which needed to be done urgently. The way chairs actions works is that it has myself, this is a decision between board meetings, myself, the chief executive, and 2 independent members needs to agree to the chair's actions. In this case, it was Ruth Lazard, the vice chair, and Marion Wynne-Jones, the chair of audit, who were the 2 additional independent members. And that was to approve a shared services contract for the All Wales approach to utility contracts, and a number of our sites fall within that shared services contract. So if people are happy to approve that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. And at that point, I'll stop. And if anyone does have any questions or comments on my report, please do. If not, I'll move on to the Chief Executive's report and invite Helen to present her report. Helen.
Well, welcome back, Chair. So just a couple of things to update the board on. It's been quite a busy couple of months, actually, moving into the year end. I probably want to pick up on paragraph 3.2, which is the iCare digitisation programme. I've actually received the gateway review for that programme that was undertaken a couple of weeks ago this morning from the SRO. So, and one of the 6 recommendations within the review is that the programme should transfer to Digital Health and Care Wales, actually sets a date of the 1st of June. So we will work through that with the SRO. We've got a joint meeting with the SRO and Welsh Government colleagues next week. So we will start to commence build that transition plan and a way forward, and understand what the rest of the recommendations need from us. So I just wanted to highlight what I'll do is we'll bring an update report on that programme to the May meeting for the board. And then down to 3.8 and 3.9, probably take those 2 together around lots of discussions that have been had around virtual wards and telecare and telehealth of late. With Tech Cymru taking the lead on that. So they're, just to remind the board, they're a programme that's hosted within the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board. So they have set up a telehealth programme alongside the telecare programme that was already in place. They've been doing quite a lot of work with the local authorities around the telecare agenda, and actually picking up on the readiness for the switch off of the PTSN approach through with BT going forward. So a lot of focus on how we can look to expand the use of telecare, alarm receiving centres and the responders that are needed in the kind of community care, and how that supports then health and care as a whole in terms of some of the considerations around admission avoidance and keeping people safe and well and healthy at home. So I just wanted to draw that to the attention. I think there will be more conversations moving forward. We've been discussing this with Welsh Government, and the need really to make sure that we've got a joined up national view of the activities that are going on and the strategies that we need to put in place, and how and where we would have opportunities for expansion, particularly moving into next winter and clearly the future winters. And then just the final point is to point out just this week actually that Rydian and Ivan, joined by Darren Lloyd, our Associate Director for IG and Patient Safety, attended the Equality and Social Justice Committee, who are having a kind of one-day inquiry into how personal data is used and shared across the NHS. I think a really good discussion from what I've seen of it, and really good opportunity to highlight the opportunities that we've got in terms of wider data and digital agenda, and the importance then on having the appropriate data policies and data sharing arrangements in place and safeguards in place for that. They were just the highlights I wanted to share, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. And anyone got any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on. Okay, thank you, Helen. If we move on then to part 4 of the agenda, the strategic items. And before I move on, I just explain. You will have noticed that there wasn't a shared listening and learning presentation on today's agenda, and that's only due to the fact that it's such a heavy agenda. The last meeting of the financial year, we felt it was appropriate to not to have one in terms of the time constraints. That's the only reason there isn't one of those that item on the agenda today. So moving on to the strategic items, and now consideration of our IMTP for 2023 to 2026, and I will hand straight over to you, Ivan.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just making sure that everybody is able to hear because we have the interpretation. It really is a genuine pleasure for me to introduce this year's integrated plan. I've been with DHCW for a year. I've really enjoyed working with the staff, and I really want to start by praising and saying thank you to everybody who's contributed to putting together this year's IMTP, the planning team in particular, but across the organisation. As members will know, we have been running workshops, including members of the board, our stakeholders and our staff and managers over the past 4 months. Over 100 people have contributed to that. And I think that, first of all, that's important in terms of putting together an IMTP, but also in order to make sure that everyone can take ownership of the plan. And I hope that this year we will be able to work with this IMTP throughout the year. So I want to talk about certain aspects. I'm not going to talk for long. I don't have a presentation per se, but firstly, I'd like to draw people's attention to the fact that this year's document is shorter than it has been in the past, 66 pages. It's really hard work to summarize all of our activity into such a concise and clear document of that length. It was over 100 pages last year, and that's because we as an organization provide a very, very wide range of services. Not everything is included in the integrated plan. I want to draw attention to that. So the emphasis of the IMTP is the change work, the transformation work, and the additional work that we do, and our principal programs. So there's an awful lot of services, business as usual services, I would call them, or that are core to us as an organisation. They are included in the plan. So finance and staff and resources, they are in there, but they're not as apparent as some of the things that we extrapolate, because we're trying to put the emphasis on the things that are most important to us in terms of delivering them throughout the year. So I'd like to encourage anybody who's watching and listening, obviously the members of the board will have already read this document, but for those who are viewing, I would really encourage you to read this document. It's been put together to be an easy read document, and so that it'll take just 1 or 2 cups of coffee to get through rather than 4. And so I'm really pleased of the presentation and the format of it. So just want to touch upon a couple of aspects very simply, and then I will ask for contributions, questions from the board, if that's okay. Firstly, the strategic engagement is really challenging for him across the NHS and social care in general. And the digital arena is very rapidly changing, and it's important that we can respond to that. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we've put so much emphasis on trying to be clear as to what we do and set out in a way that we can understand fully and help our stakeholders to understand fully as well. There's an awful lot going on. There is additional pressure all the time, but it's vitally important that we understand the opportunities and that we can communicate those to our stakeholders, including Welsh Government, so that everyone understands what's going on. In terms of some of the things that we've tried to extrapolate in this year's document, we've tried to be as open as we possibly can be in terms of the challenges we have ahead of us. So the document has been published, though I would like to emphasize that it is in draft format, that it's been published at the moment. It's on the website It will be, with the seal of approval from the members, hopefully, it will be submitted to Welsh Government tomorrow. Welsh Government then will give us feedback on the document over the coming 4 to 6 weeks, and then we will confirm the document in its final form. And when we do that, we will then translate the document into Welsh as well. It hasn't yet been translated. That's because it's a draft document. But as soon as we will have its confirmation as a document, as a final form, we will have it translated and we will publish it in Welsh. Within the document, you can see the emphasis on some of the things that we want to see. We don't have a formal strategy at the moment, but we do have a very clear idea of our strategy and the direction we'd like to take. So open architecture and standard across the organization, moving and more of an emphasis, or more of an emphasis beyond the hospital and primary care, community care, social care. Claire will talk more about the financial pressures in particular in the next item, and being more clear as to where we know we have the resources to deliver and where we don't. So we've used a method of colours, blue and yellow. Blue are the ones where we are confident, significantly confident that we are able to deliver the year. Yellow are the things that are very important to us, but we, for various reasons, we haven't fully confirmed the resources that are required for those, and it'll be part of our performance throughout the course of the year to provide as much of that as we can. And then I just want to turn finally to some of the principal programs we have. This year is a very important year for us, I think. I see the plan as a way of, how do I say this, of sharpening up for being absolutely clear as to what our structure and priorities are, because we have a lot to deliver over the coming 12 months, particularly the new app that will be coming out over the next coming months, and the digital services for patients and the public program. Also the data, the national data resource. There's a paper on the agenda today on the next stage of that important work, and also medicines and digital transformation across the system. And also we've been talking earlier this morning about diagnostics and what we're doing in that arena. So they are huge strategic programs, and we're running all of them at the same time. So we have to be clear as to how we prioritize. Then beyond that, we have all our usual services, all the digital services that are used on a daily basis across the NHS, tens of thousands of users for all of those. So there is a considerable amount out there. So I hope that the document speaks for itself. It's available. The members have had sight of it. The board has been considering the document clearly, but it's been published in draft format on our website. And I would welcome any questions or discussion over the next 10-15 minutes, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. So lest anyone thinks this is the first, I think you mentioned this, Ivan, this is the first time the board has seen this. We've obviously had a number of iterations that we've been having to discuss in detail, given the timescales and having to deliver it tomorrow. So board members have had a considerable input into it. But Ruth, you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch, Ivan. I think the key thing for me, and that we need to reiterate and recognise, is there is so much in here for us to deliver. And I think what's really helpful is that we're expressing much more clearly how much is there. But I don't think we should be under any illusions as a board. And I think that we need to really state this publicly. It's going to be incredibly difficult to deliver everything that's in there this year. And that's a massive challenge for us. So the clearer we can be about that in our IMTP, and we have been, I think, this year, the better. So thank you for that. But I think it's a challenge for us as a board to keep on top of that over the next 12 months and make sure that we're challenging ourselves around whether we can actually deliver everything that's in there, because it's a massive agenda, so much to do. Thank you.
No, absolutely, Ruth, and a good deal of it is interdependent on other organisations and things not necessarily in our control as well, not least of which is the resources available to deliver some key developments. Anyone else got any points they'd like to make? Okay, well, Ivan, as I say, I think the silence is actually because you have afforded us a considerable opportunity to discuss this and make sure that it was the sort of IMTP that we were comfortable with the board, and the board is clearly very comfortable with it. I think it's great news that it's brevity's next to cleanliness, and we know what that's next to. So it's great news that it's shorter and slicker. And I like you, I'd like to echo the board's appreciation for the small army of people who've been involved in producing the plan and all the hard work that's gone into it behind the presentation today. So well done if you could pass on our appreciation to everyone who's put in all the effort. Okay, if I ask the board then to if they're happy to approve the IMTP, which will now be passed on to the Welsh Government for their consideration over the coming weeks. Thank you all very much. If I then move on to the next, thank you, Ivan. Diolch, Ivan. Thank you. I'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, item 4.2, the finance report, and I will invite Claire Osmondson-Little to present the report. Claire, over to you.
Diolch, Simon. Bore da. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk you through the financial position as it stands at the end of February this financial year. So I'm going to talk about where we are. And then I'm also going to share with you where we're going. So underpinning the IMTP that Ivan's just talked you through is the financials and some of the financial cost pressures and challenges that we will face as an organisation for the next financial year. So Hannah, I hope, is going to share some slides, and I will briefly talk you through where we are and take you through it. Thank you, Hannah. Can you move to the next one? Can you move to the next slide? That's it. Great. So in terms of where we're going, where are we as an organisation as at the end of February? I'm going to summarise the revenue position and highlight some of the key financial aspects of that, in particular our run rate and the DPIF position, our COVID response. And then I'm going to touch on where we are with the capital position and spend, highlight a couple of risks and opportunities which will really take us into the next financial year, where I'm going to give you some of the administration financial highlights, and then really touch upon where we're going as an organisation for our financial planning and some recommendations. So if you move us on to the next slide, please. As usual, I'm going to focus on the current core financial position in terms of revenue, our COVID response. I really want to highlight some key activities within the Digital Priorities Investment Funds, and then really look at around some of the key activities in the capital, and then really touch on where we're going. So if we move us to the next slide. So as a board, we have statutory obligations to deliver. Those are really about working within our means, so working within our capital and our revenue allocations. We also have a duty to pay our public sector within 30 days and work within our cash balances. So if you look at our current revenue position, actually we ended February with a surplus of 160,000, so we're slightly in surplus. That was a reduction of the surplus by 178, so we are working our way towards a break-even position at the year end. And within our capital, our funding envelope is just over 8 million, and to date we forecast to spend 7 million, slightly lower than where we expected, but only marginal. So we're on track again to deliver our capital allocation. Our public sector pay policy was above target at 98, and our cash balances were at 5.4 million. So they decreased during the month, but our target is to get them below 2 million by the year end. So obviously this is a key time for us now to ensure that we pay our suppliers promptly, but equally we work within our cash balances. And I also thought it was point to note that during the month, the pay award was finally agreed by Welsh Government. And from a financial perspective, obviously that was reflected in the employees' pay packets in March, and it will be transactioned in our position in March. So you should see that come through towards the year end. So again, a good position to be in and strong and confident position to end the year. So I'll move us on to the next slide. Now, the next slide will show you really that revenue run rate, the rate at which we spend our recurrent revenue. And as you can see from that graph, which the red box shows you the actual, but you can see towards the year end the sort of peak in activity. We've actually spent £116 million at the end of February, and you can see there in February and March, there's quite a high level of non-pay activity, reflecting really the Digital Priority Investment Fund activity that we're seeing as those programmes really have accelerated during the year. The key areas of spend there is obviously the National Data Resource, and in particular the analytics work, the medicines programme, and equally WCCIS. And as you recall, last month we looked at the Digital Services for Patient and Public Act, and again there's some significant work in that area at the last quarter, and you could see that in February, and we anticipate and we are seeing that in March. So yeah, quite a level of activity. The growth during the year has really reflected the growth in activity around the Digital Development Fund, and some significant work within a couple of key programmes for us as an organisation in the last quarter. So if you move us on to the next slide. Our core allocation, as you know, there's been one red box, but there's another one as we draw towards the end of the year. So our directorate performance has been underspent during the year in most areas. There's two areas of touch point. One of those is in ICT, the Information Community Technology Department, which has seen pay pressures in that particular area in and around the data centres predominantly. And equally, if you look at financial and business assurance, which is my area, towards the end of the year, we've taken decisions around external resourcing, and also improvements within our facilities, and therefore you'll see a slight overspend position there. Again, all within our financial remit as an organisation, and our total underspend at the end of the year is 160, at the end of February, sorry, 160. So I'll move us on to the next slide. So this is obviously a key area for us, and a key area for us going forward. And we've discussed as a board having visibility of the proportion of recurrent and non-recurrent spend, which I will show you in the next slide. What this slide shows you is as an organisation, we have a savings target of 2.4 million or 2.5 million this year, which equates to a Welsh Government target of 2.5%. This shows us our spend profile, or our savings target, sorry, for this year. The target is in the blue and the dark blue, and the actual is in the light blue. And what we've seen here is that although we've had a plan of 2.4 million, we will actually end the year with a savings of 4.8 million, of which you can see, what's really driving that is a couple of factors. One is our vacancy factor, which, as you can see, during the year has fallen away quite significantly, underpinning that. And equally, what we've identified is non-recurrent financial savings, but also we've also had some service and contractual savings that will enable us to deliver a strong year-end position. So if I move you on, that's our sort of current year, and look at what our sort of previous and projected savings targets are going to be. What I hope this does is trying to elaborate the proportion of recurrent and non-recurrent, but equally the rate to which we're savings. So this shows us our planned savings over the last 2 years, and our projected savings, and what's been built into our IMTP plan. Last year we saved just over 2.1 million, and you can see there that the non-recurrent is one-offs, whereas recurrent are cumulative savings that we can accumulate over a number of years. You can see there that actually of our non-recurrent, it was just over 1.1 million, which equated to 60% of our savings. For this financial year, our recurrent savings is almost a 50-50 split. It's 46% of our savings are recurrent, and 54% of our planned savings are non-recurrent. And as you saw in the previous slide, actually we're going to overshoot that significantly by around about 2.4 million. But that really reflects the non-recurrent vacancy savings that we've seen this year as the organisation has recruited into both the DPIF and the core allocation. For next year then, we have a savings target of 2.4 million, and we're targeting 79% of that for recurrent savings. And that's some of the actions that we've already put into play in relation to some of our estate strategies and some of our contractual benefits. So again, we are looking to improve our level of recurrent savings, but it's not all going to be recurrent savings going forward. So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour of the split of that savings, how much of that is recurrent, how much is that non-recurrent, where we've come from and where we're going. This is going to be a key area of focus going forward, particularly in the IMTP, so that we can understand strategically where our non-recurrent and recurrent savings plans are and where they will need to be. So I'll move us on to the next slide. So where are we in terms of some of the key other activities? So if you look at our COVID spend, as of February, we've spent just shy of 9 million and 8.7 million against our COVID activities that are split predominantly into two, the TTP, or the track and trace, and then the vaccine elements. And you can see that we're predicting by the end of the year to have spent around about 9.1 million in this particular area. So I'll move us on. The key area of activity, as we showed in the run rate, is really related to our Digital Priorities Investment Fund. And what this chart shows you is the makeup of that spend, which to date, we've spent 24.5 million, but we're actually looking to spend 31.4 million by the end of the year. We actually reduced our allocation for DPIF during the month by about 1 million relating to the National Data Resource Programme. But what this shows is that split of spend and the remaining balance of spend that we are looking to achieve in March, and we are looking, as with 1 day to go, I can assure you that that spend is complete. So I'll move, but what we do see is at the back end of the year, those top 3 programs have really seen a high level of activity and have delivered quite a number of work packages. And like I said, we saw that with the app last month in the board. So let's move us on to the next slide. Our capital allocation for this year was 8.1 million. To date, we've spent slightly in line with plan, slightly below plan, but we're more or less there with 7 million. We've still got 1.1 million to spend in March, and that is dominated really by 2 areas. One is our ICT or infrastructure spend, and I'm confident that we will achieve that. And equally, we would see some activity in the digital intensive care unit, but equally across the digital services for patient and public. Again, I'm confident that we will achieve a balanced position within the capital for this financial year. So let's move us on. And as we're at the end of the year, it's just really reinforcing that the risks around inflationary, in particular energy, remain. And we are still progressing our work on VAT recovery with the HMRC. So there's still opportunities in the system going forward. So I'll move us on. So as we draw to the end of another financial year, we are obviously working with the Welsh Audit Office to finalise our financial accounts and our final statutory accounts preparation. Just for note, really, that the Audit Wales draft accounts are due to be finalised by the 5th of May. Together with the remuneration reports and performance reports by the 12th of May. There is a revised audit standard that comes into play this year, ISA 315. That has a couple of implications for us. It will drive up our audit fees by 10%, so they'll go up by about 27,000. But it also means that the timing of the audits will be slightly later. So the AGM reflects that on the 31st of July. And we're working collectively and have been now since the beginning of this month with the Welsh audit team to achieve those dates of submission, and we're working well with them. And obviously we'll bring that to the audit committee, our progress against that as we progress. So I'll move us on to the next slide. So I'm now going to really touch on the assumptions around our plan for the next financial year. I think it's true to say this will be for the NHS in Wales a hard and challenging year, given the financial backdrop, with quite a number of uncertainties, quite a number of operational challenges, but also the underlying cost pressures reflecting inflation as we go. So Welsh Government have given us a number of working assumptions. So we've been given our allocation assumption of 1.5%, but also for the following 2 years. We have now confirmed our core funding allocation, which also assumes that any future pay awards will be managed as they have this financial year, centrally by Welsh Government. But there is a distinct difference between this financial year and the forthcoming one, is that our energy costs will no longer be funded by the Welsh Government and would have to be absorbed within our own activities. And as you will see in my next bridge, when we come to it, that is a significant challenge for us, as we have, obviously, we are supported our operations by 2 data centres, which are energy heavy, and therefore that will create pressure for us going forward. We have now agreed our primary care allocation, which includes our licensing commitment. Myself, together with Sam Hall, met with Welsh Government, and we have now instigated some more closer operating analysis to going forward, which I think will be helpful in really developing that primary care strategy. COVID-19, we've also now had our funding letter issued with Welsh Government, which has indicated that it will cover our operational costs only going forward, and is slightly less than what we requested. And therefore we've taken action to ensure that and also confirm with Welsh Government our working assumptions around what that funding will cover going forward. Our digital priority investment funds, I welcome the work that we're doing with Mike Emery in this space, and he has confirmed our assumptions for the first year. And again, there are some areas where we've got a working arrangement, and we will have to do some more work to further clarify some funding, and I'll talk on that in a minute. And our discretionary capital allocation has been allocated. It's up from this year, it's 2.6 million, but it's down from our allocation in 21-22, which was 3, and obviously our IMTP reflects that. Given our funding allocations that have been clarified since our last board, we have identified a funding gap for this financial year of 1.9 million, and going forward that would increase to 3 and 2. And therefore, in accordance with the requirements, we have acknowledged this gap and written formally to Welsh Government with an accounting officer letter to say it is unlikely we will balance this year, and we are waiting a response from Welsh Government on that. Obviously, we are looking at actions to mitigate that gap, but again, it's good. Like I said, this will be a challenging year for us, particularly on that backdrop. So what I'm going to do now is talk you through some of those funding pressures and offsets through a bridge. So if we move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. So before we do that, I will talk about some of the unavoidable pressures and necessary investments that we have for next year, and then we'll see how those come into play in the following slide. So we are growing, and what Evan has alluded to as an organisation, you can see the growth in the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, but equally we're growing as an organisation, as Helen alludes to in her chair's report. We've not only taken aboard Link and Risk, but we will also take on ICA. So as an organisation, we're growing and continue to grow. We are experiencing digital inflation. We are seeing some significant cost pressures with licensing, software and support costs. We are having to become more cyber resilient, and as a consequence to that, we are seeing some necessary investments and actions to take on. Like I alluded to before, energy is now really an exceptional cost pressure for us, and the implications for that for the data centres is significant. And obviously we are working along how we mitigate that. But I think it's true to say, given the extent of the cost pressure, it is unlikely we will. We are going to migrate to a new data centre. So the last quarter of next year is going to be a busy one, where we will now really finally move to a really new operating model, both data centres now migrated. And we will continue to transfer programs from development into business as usual. And you'll see that in the next slide, that has already started and has significant implications for us as an organisation to absorb those operating requirements, but also to our health boards and trusts to fund those. But we don't want to just cover our unavoidable pressures and necessary investments. We want to grow further. So there are some choices we will need to make over the next year in terms of the rate at which we adopt cloud, and also the rate at which we want to make further investments and organizational changes. So that's really the backdrop to some of the financial issues and challenges we have. And I'll now move us on to look at the bridge. So the next slide, we finally got here. Yes. Shows you really some of those financial challenges and offsets for this financial year. Apologies, this is a bit busy, but I'll talk you through now in financial context some of those things that I just mentioned. So we have an underlying deficit brought forward, really reflecting those non-recurrent savings, but also some of the unfunded business challenges that we have as services grow, of 1.3 million. Our digital cost pressures really of 2.35 million really reflects some of the high integration costs and contractual costs that we're seeing, and contractual renewal prices are significantly higher than what we've seen. And we've seen that certainly in VMware and other contracts that we have. The 6.1 million really reflects of new services and growth, which is the big blue bar here, really reflects two things, it's true to say. Some of that is the transition of digital programs into business as usual. And for the next financial year, you'll see the Centre of Excellence stand on its own 2 feet, together with the critical care digital programme and the Welsh Nursing Care Records. And those total over 4.3 million of that 6 million transfer. We will also have growth in our service provisions, and we're certainly seeing cost challenges around firewalls, for example, and other aspects of DHCW services. Operational and general inflation in pay, those really reflect our sort of pay pressures that are non-general. So where we have grade movements and pay pressures, we'll see some of that come up in there. Maintenance and support pressures fall into that as well. We're seeing significant maintenance and support together with software licensing. Our exceptional cost pressures, which are 1 million, really reflect the energy costs. So we're seeing there the implications of the data centres. So of that £1 million, nearly 900,000 of that is data centre related. And then we're also seeing the last two pressures of the 1.7 and 2.5 really are the all Wales licensing pressures, reflecting really the Microsoft aspects and growth costs there. So as an organisation, the total recurrent pressures which will materialise next year are forecast at 16.3 million. Now we're able to mitigate all of those, most of those, although we're left with a balance of 1.8. And how are we able to do that? So we have a core uplift of 1.5 million from Welsh Government. We also have a primary care uplift that I alluded to earlier of 1.5 million. We can apply the 2.5% uplift to our SLA, which equates to about 150,000. And the additional SLA uplift is 6.3 million, together with the Microsoft uplift of 2.5. So we're seeing a significant SLA uplift of around about 8.8 million relating to that transition of programs, the DHCW cost pressures of operating those from support and maintenances, but also the Microsoft. So when you add all of those together, it leaves us with an operating pressure of 4.2 million. You take off the savings plan target that we're already talked about, 2.4, that leaves that 1.8 million or 1.9 million pressure. And if you forward project some of those, I didn't put all the detail behind it, you're looking at a 3 million gap for subsequent years and a 2 million gap further on. So what does that all mean? So that means that and it sort of underpins that accounting officer letter that we report. Ordinarily, we would have a requirement as a board to balance. We've got a short gap currently of 1.9 million. And of that 1.9 million, 1 million of that relates to that exceptional energy pressure that we haven't been able to absorb. So I hope that gives you, I'm sorry, it's a lot of detail, a lot of lot to take in, really sort of brings to life the context in which we're operating and those pressures and translating those into that bridge. So I'll just move us on. I'm nearly there. So before I go into note, I think it's also important to capture the things that are funded and will be done next year. So I think it's important to note that we will move a data centre, and that has been a joint agreement. We've worked closely with Welsh Government to cover that from DPIF and from our discretionary fund. So we will fund the capital aspect of that move. Welsh Government will fund the additional revenue costs of 1.6 million to enable to make that move. And equally, the cyber resilience plan. So we've put in a detailed business case through the Digital Priority Investment Fund. They've agreed to fund the capital and some of the revenue for next year. I need to note that it's not recurrent revenue, but actually it shows goodwill on both parts to get cracking with the key aspects of that cyber plan and make sure that resilience is undertaken. I think it's also important to note, if you looked at this financial year in the earlier part of the graph where we saw a higher than planned savings reflecting the recruitment is Sarah's James Works that's led through her workforce team have really worked hard in that recruitment we all have. So actually that benefit or that headroom isn't there for next year. So our ability to work within our plans as a collective board and team is going to be increasingly important. And the other thing to note is that as contracts are being renewed and those cost pressures are surfacing, you know, trying to balance a 10% inflation against a 1.5% or 2% uplift is really challenging. So I think we're having to make as an organisation some choices on how we do that. And finally, as an organisation, we do have to show efficiency and effectiveness and economy in what we do. And I think, again, working with our directorates on our directorates reports, driving out efficiency and effectiveness wherever we can is what we do. And we are starting to really home in and understand strategically where are the recurrent cost savings and benefits that we could as an organisation strategically tackle. So unfortunately I haven't been able to keep it brief like Evan, but I think it was important given where we are so you understand where we've come from and where we're going. I hope you note the comments of the report and the year-end financial position. I'm confident we will balance this year. I'm not so confident next year. I'm welcome now, Chair, to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. That was a very helpful run through. I can see there's 3 hands up, and if they don't cover things, as I've got a couple of points, but only if they're not covered. I think Alistair, you're first, then Helen, then David.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Claire. That was really very clear, and you've illustrated the financial pressures over the next 3 years. But to give us a context for what we're working through, the headline rate of inflation is running now at 10.4, but it's almost meaningless in our world. The projected end of year by the OBS, I think, is now running at 2.9%. Have you got an estimate of the projected inflation rate for our digital sector by year end? Is it looking to fall off in the same way that the headline rate is falling off? But just to give us an understanding of the nature of the gap that's developing with every month that passes by. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. There's a couple of things in that. So we've identified digital inflation, yeah, and where our non-pay contractual cost pressures are. And because most of our contracts are multi-year, what we don't see is a monthly variation in those. They tend to step up and stay fixed. So I don't see in the non-pay aspects of our contractual pressures a reduction. Having said that, Microsoft, for example, have moved to a biannual price renegotiation for their Azure cloud, for example, to reflect the vulnerability of the dollar-pound position. So there might, whereas we've now got multi-year agreements and where they are renegotiated, we see a step up. I think then, depending on how the economy stabilizes, it'll be interesting to see whether that becomes an industry trend or whether that's just a Microsoft issue. In terms of inflation, then from an energy perspective, now we've entered into, it's difficult to foresee that, to be honest with you. I think there's a general, we've come up with a flat rate as a finance community around the energy. So we're not predicting any monthly variations and a fall off to second half year. We're almost taking a position for the year. That may become an opportunity for us. I think at this point in time, it's prudent to create that as an opportunity and keep it like that. The other bit to note from DHCW is our pay inflation is held centrally. So that would be covered by Welsh Government as it does now. So I'm sorry, a long answer to your question. I think it's multidimensional. So from a digital perspective, it's generally fixed for the year. Energy may be an opportunity for us, and fingers crossed it will. And then the pay part of that will be covered predominantly with Welsh Government. Having said that, I think there is an aspect of where we've got external resources supporting us, we will see a pressure because there is shortage, and obviously for digital skills within the Welsh market.
Thank you, Claire. Helen, I think you want to come in now, and then David, and then Marion.
Yes, the point for me is more of a comment than a question. It's just to clarify to the board that this means Claire's presentation following Ivan's presentation of the IMTP, that and on the back of me submitting the accountable officer letter, that we're not submitting a balanced plan because of the significant financial risks that we've got, notably around kind of the unavoidable cost pressures around energy and some contractual kind of pressures that we've had. So just wanted to clarify that for the board.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we need to be cited on that, don't we? We need to be absolutely aware that we're moving into a different space. David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Claire, for the presentation. Clear as always. I just have one point of clarification. The additional SLA funding that you've secured, could you just confirm that that covers all of the DPIF programs that go into service this year? Because we had a risk around that. Just seeking some clarification.
So good question. Thank you, David. The SLA recharge does cover 3 main programmes that are transitioning from DPIF. So that's the Welsh Nursing Care Records, the Critical Care and the Centre of Excellence, and the inflationary aspects of the Microsoft contract. However, we have not, and we won't because they'll come in today, tomorrow on the 31st of March. We've not yet had full confirmation of the SLA income. So that still remains an outstanding funding risk should health boards and funds not sign the SLA agreements. Having said that, we have had 1 or 2 that have come back signed already, but that still remains a risk until we've had full written confirmation back from the health boards. So that's a good point. Thank you, David.
Thank you both. Marion.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Mae'n nghwestiwn i yn ymwneud â chynlluniau arbedion, Claire, a diolch am y cyflwyniad clir a hynod ddefnyddiol yna. Mae'n dda gweld y cynnydd yn y canran o arbedion cylchol, a da ni'n gwybod bod hwn wedi bod yn heriol i ni yn y gorffennol. Be di lefel y hyder chi bod modd i ni gyflenwyr lefel yma o arbedion cylchol yn y flwyddyn i ddod?
Thank you, Marion. Diolch, Marion. So for this financial year, actually, we've taken steps already to secure some of those recurrent savings. So our estates plan, for example, will be actioned from July. So that would enable those recurrent savings to materialise. So there is areas that I feel pretty confident that we've put the steps in place to deliver that. There is a gap. It's probably about 25–30% of our savings where we don't have those plans yet, and therefore there is actions that we will need to take as an executive team to deliver that and bridge that gap. So I'm reasonably confident, Marion, would probably be a diplomatic place to position myself in. I think the challenge for us is actually for forthcoming years. This year is going to be challenging, but what we need to do as a board and as a collective this year is look at our strategic savings plans, because we can trim around the edges in the short term, but in the longer term, we really need to look at our non-pay and our operating model and really consider how, as a digital organ in a growing and as you can see, the demand for our services is increasing, which is great. We have to demonstrate the way we deliver those services is efficient and effective. So I think we're going to transition. You're going to see a presentation shortly from Sam on the product. To me, that is where we as an organisation can deliver our services in a far more efficient and effective way. Whether that will generate recurrent savings, I don't know, but I think that's the piece of work as a team we need to really focus on now going forward.
If I could just make one observation before bringing Rowan in, because it's specifically around the savings plan, because the other key thing is you need to front load them. Because if we're coming up with a savings plan and they kick off in December or January, then you've only got 3 months savings. So it's often, and that's been a trap that many have fallen into the past, that Marion will know, is that you've got a savings plan of X, but in actual fact only Y of it is a full year. The rest of it is a part year.
So that's why I like to keep my team fit. So if you looked at that savings plan, you saw that it was front end loaded and tailed off for this financial year. So I think it's a challenge for us all to keep Couch to 5K fit and make sure we've done our exercises before the 1st of April, so that the first quarter we recover what we need to recover to ensure that we've got some headroom to the latter part of the year. But you're right, Simon, we do need
to keep the sporting analogy, playing catch up never works, does it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Rowan, you wanted to come in.
Claire, I just wanted to ask for some commentary on, the uncertain funding pressures over the next couple of years. What impact does that have on us sort of planning for savings? I mean, we've talked about energy. We know that the data centers consume energy, and most of it is lost as heat. There are heat to power systems that would reduce our carbon and be consistent with some of the other Welsh policy. But how might we avail ourselves of that? Because I've just looked at the Cornwall Insights power curve, and they're predicting out to 2030 that energy costs are going to be, at best, twice what they were pre-pandemic. And in some respects, that's a good thing, because, for climate, we need to use less power. So has there been any discussion, or is that just something that is inconceivable in the current funding climate because of the year-on-year uncertainty?
Yeah, thank you. And that really reflects the Chair's action. So as DOFs, we've taken a view that we have to have a national approach to the way that we procure power. So that would hopefully mitigate the pricing risk to a certain extent by going through the Crown contract. But I think your question is more about, I think it is a good driver, actually. We do need to look at our CO2 footprint, and we need to look at what our long-term sustainable solution is for energy supply. And I would have to probably work alongside Sam to understand, how does a data center compare to a cloud? And is there an argument to say that we could mitigate that risk by accelerating our cloud strategy? And therefore, that might be a way, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about moving to product, understanding our requirements, putting them into a more technical, efficient and effective solution might help some of that. And we need to, I don't think we've really considered that aspect of our through energy efficiency. We have an energy efficiency group, by the way, so underpinning this, we have a group that looks both at our estates, but predominantly now in our data centers, and that's done some great work, foundation work now to help us evaluate that. So I don't think we can mitigate it totally, but I think it now becomes a closer decision factor in some of our decisions that we're going to make as a team going forward, and we'll need to look at it really as part of our decarb strategy.
Thanks both. Ivan, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Simon. Briefly, I just want to really credit Claire with that comprehensive presentation, very detailed one on finance. That's why I didn't cover finance in a lot of detail in my IMTP, because she can do it a lot better than I can. As Helen has commented, we are submitting formally. We're submitting an unbalanced IMTP. I think I feel that we are exposing where the balance point is through the way that we're showing what we've got confirmed funding for, what we don't have confirmed funding for, and that makes the IMTP a tool that we can use to manage through the next few years. And if you do look through it, you can see there's yellow that pops up in years 2 and 3 where we don't have confirmed funding running through into future years and into some other areas. So I just want to just join these last 2 items together, as Helen did at the beginning of the comments. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Ivan. Just a couple of observations for me, and a question really, which is, I suspect, a really dull question, and then you can pick up to conclude the item, Claire. And I think the first bit really is probably more with Chris, because if we're not going to get the annual accounts until the 31st of July, and the AGM has to be on the 31st of July, and I'm pretty sure our standing orders must determine a time that papers have to go out, what is the solution? Will we just be holding our AGM slightly out with the standing orders? And if so, is there anything we need to do, given that that is out with our control?
So,
go on, Chris.
Yeah, do you want me to come in, Claire? So at the moment, the indication from Audit Wales has been strongly that we will achieve the 31st of July AGM date. You are right. Standing orders say by the 31st of July, we have to have held an AGM. If that is going to change, we would need approval from Welsh Government to change that date. Audit Wales are in discussion with Welsh Government. That is a potential option, but I think we're quite confident. Claire and Mark, I think, have had some discussions with Audit Wales, so I think we are confident that we will achieve the date.
But I assume there's a date by which we have to publish papers on the website in advance of the AGM, so that will bring forward the date that we would need the finalised accounts from the 31st of July, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 10 days before we have to have notified. Okay. So we'll need to be very confident, or we'll need to know with certainty at that point, but I would hope we would know what before that.
Okay. And then the question, and this is the dull bit. So, I mean, we end this year with an 160k underspend, which I assume is just that goes back to Welsh Government, or that we don't draw it down, is the way that works. We've overshot savings by 2.4 million. The 2 blocks that you showed us that were in deficit, I think, added up to around about £1 million from memory. Where's the rest? Should we not have ended up with a bigger underspend if we've overshot our savings plan by 2.4? What am I missing? By 2.4 million, and that is not entirely eaten up by those 2 red blocks that you showed us, because they don't add up to £1 million. They don't add up to £1 million or thereabouts.
So I think what you're saying is you've saved more.
Yeah.
But your end position is only and it's 160 at the end of February. We've still got.
Why is it not more? Yeah.
So why isn't it not more? So the allocation goes back to Welsh Government. What we've also seen is, as you saw in those red blocks, we are investing in some key areas as well. We're making some decisions to invest. So and we've also spent something on the so if you looked at the red blocks, you could see that we've spent in some areas. So the net effect is that we've made some decisions in some areas to net that off. So we won't be handing that. They take the savings off our CRL. So they take off our savings from when we give those back. We've given some of those back already. They reduce our CRL, which is our control revenue limit. So they reduce our budget down in effect. So when you get to the end of the year, you won't show those gains. So we've already, through our monthly monitoring returns, reduced our
overall budget
revenue limit, or the limit that they've given us.
Okay.
So in effect, we've brought our line down. So our variance against that line remains the same.
So they've squeezed the pips through the year rather than just in one block at the end of the year. Okay, I understand then. I couldn't quite make the figures add up in my head, which is usually my problem, not anyone else's. Anyone else got any comments on the finance report that we've had, which covers obviously last year and then next year? And I assume Claire will need to be thinking very hard about how the finance report's presented in the context of us drilling down on the anticipated deficit and how we're addressing that, because it's another bit beyond the savings plan, isn't it? And we need to have it. We need to be cited on the actions that will be taken beyond the savings plan to address the deficit situation.
Yeah, I think there's two things that I'm really keeping my eye on now. One is the response from health boards around the SLA. So going back to David's point, assuring us that they agreed to those charges, and then awaiting the response from Welsh Government around the letter. And yeah, I think we have to think out of the box as well. And we're doing that collectively, as not just DHCW, as the NHS finance in Wales, really. You know, these are difficult and challenging times. I don't know whether my colleagues are actually spending a lot of time on savings. They really are just looking at the choices that they will need to make in order to balance their books. So I think we should also recognise we're not alone. The challenges that we're facing are reflected across other organisations, but we hold hands together and try and find out ways that we can mitigate some of those as a collective, and that's what we need to do.
I've been having conversations with Helen about the sorts of proposals or suggestions that we submit to Welsh Government around where savings could be made, given the scale of the challenge in the next financial year, and those will needs to be, we will need to bring those in front of the board, because they could be, were we to do it, it could be quite they could be quite fundamental things that we need to stop spending money on. But we'll come to that in due course. Can I ask you to receive and note Claire's report? Note it with pleasure for this financial year, with concern for next financial year. I think we need to make the distinction. Okay, thank you all very much. We're running a bit ahead of schedule, and I'm going to do a very dangerous thing now, which is take, rather than break now, we'll take the next item and then definitely break after that, because I think the product approach discussion would probably be very useful to draw breath and have a break before Sam. So we'll definitely break after this next item, and which is the item 4.3, the discussion around the strategic equality plan. And I'm going to invite Sarah Jane to kick off the item, to introduce the item for us. Sarah Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I do feel a great privilege inviting this report to the board today. It's the first strategic equality plan by the Digital Health and Care Wales organisation, and it formalises our plan and our commitments for the next 4 years of the work that's already started. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to see the full report, which is part of the papers. But I prepared these slides really just to give us a bit of a flavour of some of the things that are integral within the report and where our ambition and our commitments are going to take us. So in terms of what we're trying to achieve, and in terms of our world-class digital services, being an employer of choice, and we've had a number of accolades in the last year, and we want to continue to be seen as a great employer that is welcoming and diverse and supportive to everybody, and that's a key thread of the plan. And a great place to work and thrive and innovate. Again, not just a place to work, but actually to really enjoy working here, to thrive, to innovate, to become the leaders and the specialists in that digital architecture for the future. And really the plan formalises that. The assurance piece in terms of across Wales is to provide that culture of openness and transparency. And we were awarded the BS7 6000 some years ago. I think we were one of the first organisations in the UK to do so, and it's being reaccredited this year. So we had a desktop exercise last year to say, were we on the right track? We knew we had to do a number of things to, maintain and to keep that accreditation. And it's a really important indicator for us that we do that for everything that we want to achieve. So that's coming up later in the year. Can I have the next slide, please? So what I've done here in terms of just highlighting some of the key components of the report. So there are 4 key elements: the attraction and retention, anti-racism, anti-bullying and development opportunities. These are all integral within all of the protected characteristics and in terms of everything that we want to try to achieve. So we've recruited a dedicated resource to support me and the wider team with this, and really to drive those commitments forward. I would really like to say a shout out to Marilyn in terms of her support in trying to shape and craft this and work across that diversity network. That's been fantastic. And we are now putting an equality diversity network together to put that across the organisation. So we really do get various voices and everything at the table, so we can take that forward as a real team dynamic. So that's going to be a really important thing for us. So in terms of the attraction and retention, we've got a number of diverse networks and communities that we work with, but really this is about putting some formalisation and some strategy around it as part of our new strategic equality plan to say, how are we doing, what are we doing, what do we need to do better, how can we improve, and really putting a bit of a focus on some of the analytics as well, just to start mapping and start achieving and understanding where we've got some gaps and barriers and how we overcome those, and put some really good innovation in place to make sure that we are working forward in the desired way. In terms of the anti-racism, there's a lot of work going on across the whole of Wales. We've got an anti-racism plan within the strategic equality plan, which is a really good indicator. And we'll be running a number of workshops and focus groups as well. This will be part of the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion Network, which we're starting next month. And this is hopefully going to be something really, really important for us. We've got a really diverse workforce. We want to encourage people to join us, but also encourage people to stay with us and thrive and develop. So it's really important that we put this marker in place and that we really put that out for everyone to come and join that, really, that is interested. Again, the anti-bullying, we've already indicated as part of the People in OD strategy launch last October, that we've got to really, we're driving that leadership culture, that compassionate leadership. We've done a number of leadership events. We've got a number of different leadership activities that are in place. We're signalling a zero tolerance to bullying and a committed partnership approach. And we do work with a number of organisations, and indeed we work really closely with the trade unions, which is really positive. And that's very, very positive in terms of how we work with employee relations and get that temperature check and indeed look at hotspots. So that's an integral part of the plan. And again, we class ourselves as a learning organisation, accessible and supportive to all. And I think this year will also signal a big change in terms of how we're supporting our succession planning and our talent. And integral within that is that diversity and inclusion and equality component as well. So we've done a big piece of work recently on the strategic workforce plans and training needs analysis. We've already got an ambition and a commitment to grow your own, supporting the graduate pipeline and apprenticeships. But this year we'll be really focusing on that succession planning as well, and very much looking at that talent piece. So we're also working through that to ensure that we've got that really good inclusion of people feeling that they can put their name forward, or their manager puts people forward in an open and fair way. And that's going to really be a big change this year. That's something that's probably not been a key focus in the last year. Have the next slide, please. Just a key statement really that I think is sort of a summary of where the plan is taking us and what our approach is going to be. But I feel how we work well together to support each other is the heart of a successful organisation. And embracing differences, promoting innovation, ideas and inclusion is a vital success factor in everything we do. And we as an organisation are committed to that. We're committed to this new strategic equality plan, the people and organisational development strategy, our values and our pledge. And you can see that through a number of things that we are saying and doing, that we do feel that we have got that inclusive voice in place, but this is to formalise it and to take it forward. And hopefully this will be something that we can all be really strongly part of and celebrate and be supportive. And our indicators in terms of our analytic approach, which we're going to be monitoring a lot more closely, will hopefully see a bit of a step change on where we are with a number of things through our gender pay report, through our analytical reporting, and where we can perhaps see a bit of a change and a bit of a difference. So this would be something really that will be fairly iterative. I'll be reporting on it at key points, and hopefully we will all get involved in various aspects of the plan. Final slide, please. And at this point, I would just like to say I'd really welcome any questions and would ask the board to support and approve the plan so that we can take this forward to next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SJ. I can see Andrew got his hand up, and Helen.
I just wanted to say that how much we really support this work. As a local partnership forum, we considered it in the February meeting, but also to say that there's a lot of work that goes on in the background as well. That we've got the formal boards of Digital Health and Care Wales, and but we have got a very, very good relationship with Workforce. We have a lot of less formal meetings where we talk things through, and some sort of semi-formal meetings like health and wellbeing group and things like that that are very very important in the organisation. So we can't lose sight of all that work either. But I mean, it's just to formally give our support.
Thanks, Andrew. Helen.
And thank you, Sarah Jane, and thanks to Marilyn really for all of the input that she brought to the plan as well. We really welcome having the equality and diversity plan for the organisation. I think the focus now for us is how we bring it to life, isn't it, and how it becomes part of kind of the DNA of the organisation. And just to say, we had a really great conversation about the plan in our recent leadership development day, senior leadership development day recently, led by Rydian, and that was, it was a really open conversation about what is it that we need to do then, how do we need to be as an organisation, what are our behaviours, what are the things that we really need to be more aware of to actually ensure that we embrace all of the, you know, the expectations set out in the plan and the sentiment within the plan. So yeah, really welcome it, and welcome how we will kind of bring this to life and report this up to the board going forward under the broader People in OD strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn.
I just wanted to say that I was really pleased to be involved with this process, and now we've actually got a lead in place. And following from what Helen has just said, really, for us to think about equality, diversity and inclusion as part of our DNA, the makeup of in everything we do, not just about the people side, look with our strategy development, with our programs, with everything we do really, and also just to let people know that there was consultation on this plan. So it's not just something that's been given and told to people, it's something that people have been part of. They've given us recommendations and we've taken those recommendations into account and changed the plan and shaped the plan as a process. So I feel right from the start, we're all in it together. So I think that's something I really wanted to let people know. And following on from what Sarah Jane has said as well about the analysis, we're really going to look at the data and look at how things are moving to make sure that we're getting it right and that we're reflecting and flexing really to how the organisation has changed. Yeah. And for me, I'm quite heartened to see how, you know, we won the best place to work in the industry, which is great. But also for people to recognise the diversity we now have within DHCW. So that's something for the organisation to be commended on, and for us to create an organisation that's inclusive. So once people are here, that they feel valued and they want to stay. So I just wanted to add that too.
Thank you, Marilyn. And Rowan, and then Andrew wants to come back in again.
I'm very supportive and would like just to say that this shouldn't just be our DNA, it should be our RNA. So the difference being is the RNA is what organizations, what cells are actually operating. I think we've said that, not just in as the business, but one of the biggest challenges I think we face in healthcare is the recognition of health equity. And we saw some really tragic consequences of that in the pandemic. So I absolutely support this. It's a great start. And Sarah, I'm going to be keeping a very firm eye on things like our gender pay report. This year is a little disappointing, frankly. And it's pay is just one aspect of it, but it is the aspect about how we measure, how we value our employees. And the key thing in high performing organizations is there's endless academic literature that says when you're facing complex challenges and problems, and I'm going to go as far as to say health is pretty complex, a diversity of perspectives around the table is mission critical. So this absolutely has to go from the top to the bottom, to the left and the right, the up and the down of the organization. So it's a great start, and I'm really looking forward to progress on this issue.
Thanks, Rowan. And Andrew.
Can I just come in, please?
Yeah,
Chair?
sure, SJ. Well, I'll tell you what, SJ, come in after Andrew, because I think Andrew's probably
Okay.
the last comment, and before I'll bring you in. Don't worry.
It was only just to say, I think everybody's hit the nail on the head in terms of making sure that wider involvement, and that is critical. It's not just me as a trade union rep bringing forward the views that we know to be right, but it's about living this whole strategy, and that's why I think you've all hit the nail on the head with that.
Thank you, Andrew. SJ.
Yeah, just finally, thank you for your comments. Just to say, Rowan, that the gender pay report that's included in these papers is actually a year before. It's just the way it works. We can actually start the next report in about 6 weeks' time. So in terms of some of the numbers in there, it was for 21, when I think there were only 3 members of the board that had been put in place at that point. So very happy to share that as early as possible once we can pull all the data together. But I think the next gender pay report will probably be a bit more equal, actually, to be honest, because it will be much more up to date. It will be for 2022. So I think it will show quite a positive movement in that space. So happy to share that when that's available, probably in the next couple of months.
Thank you, SJ. And is there anything else you wanted us to conclude with in terms of, don't feel you have to, but if you want to before I ask the board whether they're happy to approve?
Just to thank you, Chair. Just to say that Marilyn reminded me that I forgot to say that, but we've been through a lot of engagement on this, internal and external, and actually forensically gone through every single bit of feedback that's been received to decide whether to change it, to modify it, or that it wasn't appropriate. So we have gone through quite a lot of iterations to get to this final plan. So just formalising what Marilyn said, really, it has been quite an iterative process, but we have taken on board all the feedback that's been received to shape and craft the final version. So hopefully that is representative of a number of voices that have come across, both at our leadership event, but also through wider engagement internally and externally through sort of 3 or 4 different ways, really. So hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to input, and they feel that they own that final plan.
Thank you, SJ. Well, on behalf of the board, can I thank yourself and your team, all the people who've engaged and been part of the process of bringing the this final plan to us, and Marilyn for your support as well, which is I know SJ is really appreciated and the rest of the team have really appreciated, and people happy to approve the plan. I'm sure you are. Thank you all very much. Should take a break now until 10 past midday? As usual, please turn off your cameras and microphones, and perhaps get back here about 9 minutes past. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to the next section, next part of the meeting. And I'm not going to delay anything, but I'll ask Sam Lloyd to introduce the next item 4.4, a presentation and on product approach. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I think Hannah's about to bring up the slides, but while she does that, just to sort of introduce this, the shift to a product-centric operating model is a change that organisations have been making across the world over the course of really the last sort of 20 years, and we've seen some pretty fundamental shift in the world economy as organisations are increasingly realising that software is their primary means of production, which means that the way that customers interact with their services and the way in which they derive value is increasingly through software. And some organisations have really, blazed a trail in this area, and they've taken over huge chunks of market share from other organisations who've perhaps been a bit further behind the curve. And what it really means is mastering the delivery of software at scale through a combination of people, process, and technology changes. And the purpose of this presentation really is to set out that in the context for DHCW and explain what the key considerations for us are as an organisation, and to set out the next steps in that direction, because essentially we are a software delivery capability, and it really is the core of our business. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the shift to a product-based operating model is driven by and directly supports a number of our key strategic objectives. So mastering software delivery at scale, as I say, is the key ambition here, and that clearly underpins our mission or our vision of providing world-leading digital services. It directly supports a number of our key missions, so providing a platform for digital transformation, delivering high-quality products and services, expanding the use of the digital health and care record, being more patient and public customer-centric is a really key ambition of this, driving value through innovation, being a strategic partner. These are all things that the shift to product will really help us to achieve. It will also help us to focus our resources onto the products that we provide. This is really around aligning the organisation around the key value streams that we will be delivering. It's about minimising the time to value for improvement. So when a customer or a stakeholder requests something from us, we should be able to deliver that capability to them as quickly and efficiently as possible. So being product aligned is a really important part of having that capability. Greater focus on customer experience. A key part of the aim is to be having clear lines of sight between our customers and our products. So we should be directly engaging with our customers to understand what it is that they need from us and then delivering that as well as we can. And from all of those efficiencies and productivity improvements will come improvements in value for money. So really it's about delivering the best value for money that we can for the citizens of Wales. Next slide, please. So inherent in this change is a number of benefits which are really there for the taking. I think if we plan this correctly and we understand what we're looking to achieve and we understand how to go about doing that, there are some clear benefits for us here. Sustainable funding is a really important one, and it is about stabilizing our funding streams and understanding the move from investing in capital assets to investing ongoing revenue in continual improvements of products. But it's about more than that. It's about actually increasing the value that we're providing over time, because building something once is expensive, but then continuing to invest and improve it over time is actually getting more value for that investment. And it's constantly adding more value over time, so that the spend becomes more effective. It's important that we monitor the benefits as we shift from, as we identify what it is that we're trying to achieve, and then we make sure that we're shifting the conversation really from what's the cost of delivering some capability to what is the value that we're providing for that investment. There are plenty of other benefits to be had here as well. So accountability is a key part of this. So ensuring that we have product owners who are identified as being responsible for the development of their products and working with their stakeholders to understand how that is done most effectively, so that those product owners are really accountable and have ownership for that product and are engaging directly with their users in its delivery. Developing skills, this is a really important one for us. There are people changes involved in this activity, but it's really important that we take our people with us. We grow our own skills and talent as part of this process. And this is really about future-proofing our workforce and making sure that we can provide ourselves with a sustainable base to move forward for the next 3 to 5 years as an organisation. Integrated delivery is really important as well. That concept of the value stream and how we deliver value across all of the activities that are required to deliver some capability to our customers really extends across the whole organisation. It's not just within a software development team, it's extending some of those concepts across other parts of the organisation and really helping integrate delivery with other enabling functions. Next slide, please, Hannah. So it's often mentioned that product and project are somehow kind of in opposition to one another. That's not strictly true, but it is important to understand that there are some differences between them. So project management is really around establishing a temporary structure to deliver a specific outcome and then decommissioning that structure, whereas a product mindset is really the opposite. It's about establishing a recurrent stream of revenue which will enable a product to be continually improved over time. So it's less about building something once and stepping back from it. It's about building something and then owning it for the duration of its life. Understanding how the value is delivered is really important. That's why there's a star against it. Success is generally measured in project world, although this isn't entirely true, but it's often thought to be measured in terms of delivering a defined scope within a particular time and within a particular budget, whereas the success of a product is measured through the value that it delivers over time and how that meets customer requirements. And crucially, understanding the relationship between the product and the stakeholder requirements is essential going forward. Next slide, please. So how do we measure value in the world of product? So product takes a lot from the kind of lean manufacturing concepts of mass manufacturing. So it's about automation, it's about repeatability, but it's actually also understanding that software delivery and software development is knowledge work, and really the process of design and delivery is very closely interrelated. So purely automating and repeating something is not enough. We need to understand how we can continue to improve it and iterate it over time. The value that we deliver through our products in DHCW is, can be measured in a great number of ways, and healthcare impacts, patient impacts, improved outcomes, reduced waiting times, etc. But there are some common value items which are consistent across the world of software delivery, which can be applied in our case as well. So essentially, everything that is delivered through software can be categorized as either a feature, a defect, a debt, or a risk. So a feature is adding some improvement that's been requested by an end user. The defect is fixing a problem that's been identified by a user. The debt is really resolving an issue that's preventing us from continuing to develop that product quickly enough. And the risk is addressing something which could have legal or regulatory issues for us, for example, cybersecurity or data protection. These concepts are considered to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it means is that a feature can't be a defect or a debt, and that there isn't anything which we would do that wouldn't be one of these things. So by measuring the rate at which these items can flow through our systems, and how many of each we're doing, what the distribution of them are, how long it takes, how quickly we can produce them, how many can be in flight at any one time, we can start to get some really detailed and useful information about how we're performing as a delivery capability. Next slide, please. So when I've been talking to people across the organization about what the shift to product means for DHCW, I'm often asked, well, if we work in an enabling function, then what does this mean? Is this just something we're going to be doing within the operations directorate? And the answer is no. This is something that really, we have to look at the impact across the organization. So I've mentioned this concept of value stream a few times, which is all of the steps that are required to be taken in order to deliver one of those value items to one of our customers. And all parts of the organization will have a role to play in that. So optimizing the value stream is understanding how each of the enabling functions contributes to that delivery, and then optimizing that as much as possible. Next slide, please. So the product approach requires and is really dependent on a fairly high level of DevOps maturity. So this is modern software development methodology. It's dependent on technology stack, it's dependent on automation capability, it's dependent on continuous release and deployment pipelines, it's dependent on tool chains. I think we can extend some of those concepts across the wider organization. There's this concept now of scaled agile, of enterprises taking on agile approaches to a whole range of different activities. So the concepts can be applied outside of software development, but the core really is around having that capability to deploy code reliably and quickly and efficiently across the organization. And it's part of our plan to undertake a full maturity assessment of our capability in this area, and then to develop a plan on the back of that to understand how we, where we may have gaps and how we can advance those in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. So one of the ways in which we can benchmark ourselves from a software delivery perspective is to start to use what are called the DORA metrics, which are an industry standard set of software delivery metrics, which really help us to understand some key aspects of our capability. So I won't go through them all and explain them, but it's essentially about how quickly are we deploying, how long does it take us to change something from an idea to a realizable feature, how long does it take us to resolve from problems, and what's the failure, so how often do we attempt to do something that then goes wrong. And Google have actually helpfully defined some benchmarks for us here in terms of being low, medium, high, or elite. So we can measure ourselves quite easily against this framework, and we've started to do that work now. Next slide, please. So having a meaningful product-based operating model is dependent also on our technology architecture. So it's really important that we have the right capabilities, the right technologies, the right underpinning platforms in place that support this shift. Because being able to automate, being able to release code effectively, being able to scale our systems up and down, all of these things are really dependent on some of our technology architecture. So we've started to do an assessment internally of all of our key systems, and this is a list here which shows those that we've determined to be critical, categorized as critical, against some criteria that we've determined. So this is a bit of a sentiment analysis at the moment, and we intend to evolve this with some external support, but it shows it shows in some key areas that we've got some issues that we'll need to resolve if we're going to increase our maturity in this area. And cloud readiness is a key one here. I think that we can see is coming out as being quite red. And the idea is then to overlay this information with the DevOps maturity information that we get, which then starts to point out where we will have some specific areas of focus and areas to dive into in a bit more detail. Next one, please. So this is a sort of conceptual example of what a product operating model can look like, and it's really just to try and visually bring this alive. So what it means is that we will organize ourselves into product teams. So a product team is a group of people who will work to support one particular product. They will have a lot of expertise in that product. There'll be a product owner who really is accountable for the ongoing delivery of it. Products will naturally start to fall into groups. So they will support kind of key pillars of organizational capability. So this combination of products and product groups starts to align us around the business capabilities and value streams that we're supporting and that are visible externally to our customers. It's really important to note as well that each of these product groups needs to have a clear alignment and clear way of engaging and communicating with its stakeholders. And the product backlog should be prioritized in concert with our stakeholders, so that really we shouldn't be having any surprises about what can or can't be done, and everything that's flowing through the product pipeline should be approved by us and by our customers at the same time, ideally. And then there's this concept of supporting practices. So each product won't be standalone and completely self-sufficient. It will be dependent on some practices and some resources from other parts of the organization. So enterprise architecture, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are examples. So enterprise architecture is key. So all of the products need to be evolving in a common direction. We need to be converging around a target architecture. So we need a strong enterprise architecture function to enable that. DevOps, so we need a professional home for the software development capability and making sure that we're working consistently and following common practices and using common tool sets. IT service management, so the service desk and change, problem, incident management, etc. Those are all capabilities which are going to be really crucial for the products to be able to operate. Portfolio management, so understanding how the activity across the products is contributing to the delivery of our IMTP and strategic initiatives. And there'll be other examples: information governance, clinical support, etc. Could be others. So there's a matrix relationship between the product groups and the supporting practices. And then the operating model really hinges on having on this box in the right hand side, which is the set of processes which ties it all together. So we need to understand how we're going to matrix resources across the products and practices and so on. Next slide, please, Hannah. So this is another important point for us to note, I think, is that the product strategy on its own is not sufficient to deliver the ambitions and objectives that we have. We need to understand that this is part of a range of changes that need to be made, and it's dependent particularly on a couple of others. So the product strategy is dependent on our underpinning architecture. We won't deliver all of the benefits that we expect to deliver just by arranging ourselves into product teams. We need to have the right supporting technical architecture. And then crucially, we need to have the right supporting workforce. So we need to have the right skills and ways of working and pipelines of talent and so on that will support the first two. So what we need to do really is to baseline where we are now against each of those things. So what's our as-is operating model? What's our current architecture? And what are our current skill sets within the workforce? And then what are the targets in each of those? So we'll have a target operating model, a target architecture, and we'll have a strategic workforce. And we need to link those things together through a set of strategies and initiatives. And ideally, we would want to have some conscious interim operating models that we'll adopt along the road. So we're not moving randomly across these three things. We need to deliver some of the value early so that we can achieve a particular set of outcomes in advance of achieving the target across everything. Next slide, please. So this is a view that I'm starting to pull together of the next year's work, really, that will move us along this path. I won't go through all of these because we've touched on it quite a bit, but there's one that I will pick out, which is the cloud total cost of ownership and business case development. So Claire mentioned earlier around the work that we're starting to do in terms of understanding the total cost of ownership of moving our services to cloud and understanding what the impacts on things like our energy consumption would be, whether or not there are efficiency gains to be had, whether there's actually a potential to reduce our total costs over time. Those things will come out through this work, and we've started to engage with some of the cloud hyperscalers to help us assess the environment that we have at the moment and what that might look like in the cloud. We'll get that work externally validated as well, so that we do make sure we come out of it with some realistic numbers. I think there are potentially opportunities here to improve performance, to potentially to reduce total cost of ownership, to become increasingly energy efficient, because the hyperscale providers have invested significantly in green energy sources. They're currently not passing on the energy costs directly to their customers, although that's a dangerous assumption for us to rely on it continuing. So there are opportunities, but the really important point, I think, is that there is investment required in order for us to deliver this. In 3 years' time, we could be in a position where we've made some significant progress down this road, but it will require upfront investment to undertake that, which is probably the biggest risk to delivery at the moment. So I think, so I won't go through all of that, but I think it's probably worth just mentioning that this is a set of steps which constitutes a discovery and planning phase. So if we were to zoom back from this view, we would have a 3-year view, which shows a sort of 6 to 9 month discovery and planning phase, which we're just about to embark on, and then there would probably be a subsequent two years of delivery to get us to the target point across all of these 3 swim lanes. It's also important to call out the skills point, I think. So as Sarah Jane was saying, we've done strategic workforce planning and training needs assessment, so we can continue to build on that work. We had a helpful conversation with Gartner where they were suggesting that looking at our skill sets through 3 lenses is helpful. So what's the skill set that we need to support our current operational core? What's our legacy the skills that are supporting the services that we're trying and capabilities that we're trying to deprecate, and then what are the strategic skills that we require for the future. So what do we need? What skill sets and capabilities will we need when we get to where we want to be in 3 years' time? If we can categorize our capabilities against those three, we'll look at them through those three lenses, we can then start to plan out some training plans and skills development programs on that basis. Next slide, please. And then the final point is just to call out some risks. I think there are some significant benefits which could be had here, but it's important to understand that the delivery of them is far from certain. So the resource one is key. We've seen from Ivan this morning that we've got a very challenging set of objectives in our IMTP. So this is all net new work on top of that, or a lot of it is. So understanding how we're going to resource it is going to be really important. Investment, as I mentioned, this could deliver long-term benefits, and we need to work through the cost models on that. But it will require investment upfront to realise, and we're operating in a very challenging financial environment at the moment. The funding model mentioned at the start around how this shift from programme capital-based investments into recurring revenue, sustainable streams that are focused around the continued improvement of products. That's not a done deal. There's conversations that need to be had in order to understand how that's going to work. And then disruption. Lastly, this is a lot of work, and it's organisational change potentially. So we need to understand how we can do that safely and maintain our operations. But as I say, I do think there are significant opportunities here to increase our value as an organisation if we do this well. Thank you. Very happy to take questions.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there will be. Well, I know there's at least one. Thank you very much, Sam. That was really helpful and very interesting. Alistair first, and then Ivan's got his hand. Oh, now here they come. Alistair and Ivan, and then David and Rowan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Sam. That's really, really interesting. One of the questions that just sort of arises when you look at the scale of what you're describing is, it's surely it's not just a product shift, but a culture shift for the organization. And if that is the case, and it may be that that's overstating it, I appreciate your view on that. If that is the case, are we connecting this sufficiently well to our strategic priorities as an organization, or is that work in progress? And just one other thought, it would be great to see how this can result in effective outcomes. And a lot of what you've said explained is necessarily explaining process. It would be great to see examples of outcomes that this can lead to benefits for the organization, but arguably more important than that for residents and systems users. But thank you.
Take them as they come at the moment, Sam, and then maybe we'll wrap them up at the end. So go on. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. So the culture shift, absolutely, that's completely right. That is what this will be. And I think an aspect to this that is really important is going to be the engagement with staff throughout, and understand, communicating frequently and often and comprehensively, and giving people the opportunity to feed into the development of it, I think is going to be really key. I think that there is further work to be done on that at the moment. We've had some early engagement through the local partnership forum, and I've presented at a couple of organisational groups and so on, but there's definitely more work to be done there, and that's going to be a major ongoing strand throughout the programme. And then how to lead, or how to deliver better outcomes. I think measurement is really key to all of this, and a big part of the shift to products has got to be predicated on measuring how those value streams are performing and how quickly we're delivering those capabilities through our product delivery mechanisms. We don't have those metrics in place at the moment, and things like the DORA metrics that I mentioned are a step on that road, but there is a lot of work for us to do in that area, and that's going to be crucial to the success.
Ivan.
Diolch, Simon. Just yn gyntaf, just i ymateb I gwestiwn Alistair, oes mae cysylltiad agos iawn gyda'r newid strategol dyn ni eisiau gyrru dros y blynyddoedd nesaf. Fel bydd aelodau yn gwybod, I ni'n disgwyl ar y Llywodraeth I gyhoeddi strategaeth ar gyfer iechyd a gofal digidol yn gyffredinol, a mae'n bwysig bod yn strategaeth ni yn adlewyrchu hynny. Ond mae yna gysylltiad agos iawn gyda'r newidiadau mae Sam wedi ymlynechu. Dwi'n falch iawn bod ni'n gwneud hynny yn agored. I ni wedi ymrwymo fel sefydliad i weithio yn agored ac yn dryloyw. A mae hwn yn mynd i fod yn newid sylweddol iawn i ni. Fi jyst eisiau gwneud ambell sylw. Dyw e ddim yn mynd i draws newid pob peth i ni'n gwneud ym mhob man yn ein sefydliad. Byddwn ni'n parhau i redeg prosiectau a rhaglenni a portfolio mewn rhai meysydd, ochr yn ochr a le ni'n rhedeg dull cynnyrch o weithredu. A wi a Sam yn gweithio'n agos iawn i ddeall sut fedrwn ni'n neud hynny yn y ffordd mwyaf effeithiol ac yn y blaen. Wi'n credu bod e hefyd yn ategu rhai o'r sylwadau gan Claire ynglyn â sut fedrwn ni fod yn fwy cynhyrchiol fel gweithlu a pa mor effeithlon ydyn ni, pa mor effeithiol lle mae'r productivity benefits a capability benefits. Felly, ochr yn ochr o hwn mae buddsoddi mewn sgiliau, hyfforddi ein tîmoedd, rhoi iddyn nhw yr offer i nhw gallu gweithio'n fwy effeithiol, a wy'n credu bod hwnna'n rhan bwysig iawn ohono fe. A wedyn y peth olaf yw, dydy ni ddim yn torri tir newydd fan hyn, dydy ni ddim yn gorfod dyfeisio pethau newydd, dydy ni ddim yn gorfod arloesi cymaint â hynny, achos mae dillun o weithredu yn bodoli ar draws y diwydiant digidol a wedi gwneud ers dros ddegawd. Felly mae yna lot fawr fedrwn ni dynnu ar o brofiad bobl eraill a dweud gwir, profiad yn rhai meysydd yn sefydliad ni'n hunain yn barod, i ni yn gweithio fel hyn mewn ambell i beth. Mae'r app enghraifft yn gwaith ni gyda yn partner ni Ceinos fyna yn gyfan gwbl yn y dull hyn o weithredu. Felly mae yna lot o waith o'n blaenau, mae fe'n waith pwysig iawn, ond i ni ddim yn gorfod darganfod na dyfeisio popeth o'r newydd.
Thank you, Ivan. Did you want to come back, Sam, or shall we take a couple of other comments and questions?
Nothing to come back on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
David and then Rowan.
Thanks, Simon. And thanks for the presentation, Sam. Really great to see the progress you've made since you've joined us on this particular topic. I just wanted to make a couple of points. Firstly, picking up on the point that Alistair made around culture change, that is a significant challenge, which you've rightly identified. The key in my experience of having done this elsewhere is basically what we're trying to do around the strategic workforce planning, understanding what additional skills are required, setting out career pathways and providing training. And I think if we do all of those things, we'll easily take the organisation with us, because people will want to buy into that as part of their personal development. So I think if we couple those two things together, that deals with one of the big challenges we've got. The second big challenge I wanted to touch on was basically the one around funding and the sustainable funding model. The key to unlocking that you've already identified, which is the measurement of value, and it's the measurement of value as delivered by the products in the healthcare setting. That's quite a difficult thing to do, but it's in my experience, it's pretty key to unlocking the sustainable funding. And the second thing I'd add to that is it needs that process of measuring the value needs to be embedded in the target operating model you're coming up with as sort of key checks as you're developing it, and then you go into sort of testing the MVPs and doing pilots and all that things. We've got a similar challenge around NDR and our R&I strategy. So I think there's some potential for collaboration across the different parts of the organization in coming up with a method of doing that, and then embedding that in our target operating model. And I think if we do that and the strategic workforce planning, it'll make things a lot easier to make this transition that you've mapped out for us.
We'll take Rowan and Andrew now, Sam, and you can come up, pick up on all the points. It's probably the easiest thing. Rowan and then Andrew.
So Sam, I'm going to give you a gold star for that. I thought that was an excellent presentation and goes to the heart of addressing some of the future challenges that the organisation faces. So, kudos for that. Echoing a lot of everything that David has said. The bit for me, I think that is where this will be succeed or fall is how we bring the workforce into this. It's a massive opportunity for our workforce to be invested in, gain skills that are incredibly valuable both to us and externally. which of course drives up the challenge for Sarah Jane around retention and all of those things. I think the other key challenge for us is the interface between the product vision and Claire, your challenge in terms of how do we gain value and SLA type income under this new translational model across the local health boards as we start to deploy services. And I think that is something that is a bit of a journey for the wider healthcare system. So, if you look at the slide that Sam presented on, measures of value, the features bit is what clinicians can see, what the public can see. That's the bit that looks like value. The other three blocks around, the bugs, the other measurements that you had are really about our own operational capability in terms of, so one is about our internal operational efficiency of how we deliver things. The other is perhaps our external, how value is actually seen and proved to our customer base. And I think it's quite helpful to think of those in those terms as we are building the financial model that supports it. If we can land it, I think it transforms the robustness of this organization and its ability to drive the transformation of healthcare, particularly as it relates to the longer term objectives in a healthier Wales. So gold star for the day, Sam. Well done.
And don't worry, I'll bring you back in, Sam, when your blushes have subsided. Andrew, over to you.
Say well done. Everyone stole my thunder a little bit because you probably saw the look on my face as she said her first point. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it's going to be really important to bring the workforce with you, and also make sure that they've got the right training at the right stage, because obviously it's one thing to be dropped in the deep end. So it's just to make that point really. And thank you, Rowan, for raising it. It was.
And I think you said, Sam, in your presentation, didn't you, that you've been working through and with the LPF on this local partnership forum on this, which is great.
Yeah, just thank you for the engagement as well, because I'm no stranger to this.
Damn, my headphones have gone. Okay, can everyone hear me? Because my sound dropped out. Okay. Sam, do you want to pick up on any of the points and questions that are made in those, I think it's last three questions, contributions?
Yes, yeah, thank you everyone for the comments and questions, really appreciate it. I think they kind of fall into two key areas, I think. So this concept of the measurement of value and how we do that. So I think to David's point around the NDR, I think, where we have pockets of practice which is ahead of the curve on this, we should be taking them and trying to build those into, use those to seed the target operating model, I think. So, where we've got people that are already doing it, let's capitalize on that, I think. And then, yeah, the internal operational efficiency versus external value is a really good point. I think we need to give some thought as to whether the same measures apply to both of those, or whether we would actually want to measure them differently. And I'm not sure of that right now, but I think that's a really important lens for us to be looking at this through. So yeah, thank you. And then bringing the workforce along with us, completely agree. That's the most crucial point of this, to my mind. Is there are, as you say, really big opportunities for people in this. So we've got to work out how to do that properly and well, and take our people with us. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much, Sam. Helen's keen to get the last word in here, I can see.
Yeah, sorry, just to say, this is kind of, we recognise this is a big cultural shift, an operational shift for us as an organisation. There's a lot of work to do, and we've got to do it in the best possible way. I think what Sam has laid out today really gives us a good joint understanding of the steps that we need to make, and some of the work that we've got to do now to work out what this looks like for us as an organisation, and in the context of DHCW, the context of NHS Wales. It's going to be challenging. with the backdrop of the, the financial backdrop that we've got, but actually we've got to start on this. We can't delay starting on this, otherwise we're not going to make the progress in the transformation agenda that we all want to make and need to make on behalf of the NHS. But yeah, it's great to start to see this getting some teeth now and starting to see a plan coming together. So yeah, and really, I suppose just to acknowledge the significant support that we need to give our workforce, our staff and our people, and the opportunity, as David really helpfully set out there, in terms of how we line this up through strategic workforce planning and the development that we need for the workforce and the training that will be provided. And we've got to work out how we're going to do that within the financial backdrop that we've got and the choices that we're going to need to make as a board, as an organisation. But it's a journey that we're all, I think, really excited to be on together, really, and for Sam to be leading for us. So yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Sam, thank you very much for that presentation. I think you've gathered from the comments that everyone is really appreciative of the progress that you've made in this area and setting out the direction of travel, and recognizing that along that journey there are the challenges that Helen identified and others. So thank you very much for that, Sam. We've been asked to receive that presentation, that report, and I'm sure we're very happy to do so. If we move on to the next item, then item 4.5, and this is one of those items that we're noting it, aren't we, even, because the decisions have been made, really, which you're going to set out for us in terms of the programme board. So I'll hand over to you. It's the NDR business justification case.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Simon. Fel wnaethoch chi sôn ar ddechrau'r cyfarfod yn yr adroddiad cadeirydd, mae yna adolygiad o lywodraethiant rhaglenni cenedlaethol yn mynd yn ei flaen ar hyn o bryd, a ni'n disgwyl ateb oddi wrth y Llywodraeth, neu safbwynt oddi wrth y Llywodraeth cyn hir ar hynny. Ond ar hyn o bryd mae'r rhaglenni o dan dulliau llywodraethiant presennol sydd gyda ni. Felly mae'r papur hwn o'ch blaenau chi i'w nodi. Mae'r achos busnes, Phase 3 Business Justification Case, eisoes wedi gyflwyno i'r Llywodraeth. Mae'r Llywodraeth yn ystyried ar hyn o bryd, a mae yna drafodaeth yn ymlaen gyda nhw ynglyn â'r amodau a tylerau ar gyfer ariannu, a mae hwnna i raddau tu hwnt i'n gofal ni. Mae'r adroddiad wedi cael ei rannu yn helaeth iawn gyda ni fel sefydliad, gyda cyfarwyddwyr digidol, gyda cyfarwyddwyr cyllid, a gyda eraill. Felly mae yna randdeiliad yn cynnwys DHCW hun wedi cael cyfraniad sylweddol, ac yn amlwg mae'r tîm yn gyflogedig gan DHCW. Felly ni wedi cael yn dwylo arno fe, ond yn ffurfiol mae fe i'r rhaglen i gyflwyno i'r Llywodraeth, a mae'r Llywodraeth yn ariannu y cwmpas llawn o beth sy'n cael ei ofyn am. Mae'r cymal hwn o'r NDR yn bwysig, achos dyma'r cymal lle mae fe mynd mewn i gynhyrchiant, lle mae'r llwyfan yn cael ei roi yn weithredol, yn genedlaethol, a beth sy'n digwydd yn y cymal, y trydydd cymal hwn, yw staff ychwanegol, adnoddau ychwanegol, mwyn bod ni'n gallu rhoi data trwy'r llwyfan sydd gyda ni, a ni'n gallu darparu hwnna i'n partneriad ac i'n systemau cenedlaethol presennol. Y rheswm wy'n meddwl bod e'n bwysig, bod e'n dod o'ch blaenau chi, yw, eto, fel mae rhai wedi sôn mewn cwestiynau ynghynt yn y cyfarfod heddiw, ar ddiwedd y cyfnod, mae gyda ni glogwyn wrth bod yr arian mae'r Llywodraeth yn rhoi mewn i ddarparu'r gwasanaeth a'r llwyfan cenedlaethol yn dod i ben. Does dim ar hyn o bryd gyda ni eglurdeb ynglyn â beth sydd yn digwydd yn dilyn hynny, ond mae'r staff yn gyflogedig ar yn llyfrau ni. Felly wy'n credu bod e'n bwysig iawn bod ni'n ymwybodol o beth sydd yn digwydd, bod ni'n nodi y cais hwn sydd yn mynd ger bron, achos mae yna risg yn y dyfodol i ni. Fedrwch chi weld hynny yn yr IMTP, lle mae blwyddyn 3 yn felyn, yr enghraifft, achos dyw'r arian ddim wedi sicrhau. Ond mae fe ddim ond i'w nodi, croesawu cwestiynau os oes angen, neu os oes cwestiynau gan unrhyw, ond mae'r BJC wedi cael ei gyflwyno i'r Llywodraeth, a ni'n disgwyl cadarnhad yn ystod yr wythnosau nesaf gobeithio o'r fframwaith cyllido ar gyfer y blynyddoedd nesaf.
Thank you very much, Ivan. Has anyone got any questions or comments? David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ivan, for the update. When I was going through the paper, I noticed in the back that we've got quite a lot of areas of potential benefits from standing up the platform. I think I counted 15 in total. are we clear at the end of the 2 years funding that we're seeking what benefits will have actually been realised in the wider NHS, and are we clear on who owns responsibility for delivering those benefits?
Well, I'll answer in English, David, so I'll answer questions in whatever language they're asked in. The benefits will be owned by the partners in the NDR program, and that includes the health boards. So our programs are different, as we've discussed before. So if you look at something like DSPP, that is quite strongly owned at the moment by DHCW. So we manage the contract and the team. The NDR is much more of a formal consortium program. So there are staff that are funded in individual health boards across Wales. There are local data resources that are funded through the health boards from the national program that link into the national data resource. And there's a strong orientation that the data platform is there to be used and consumed by the health boards, as it is by us through national services. So I think the benefits are jointly owned. We as an organization are clear that we need to tighten up on our benefits realization. We've been discussing it today, and we've discussed it previously in other areas. So we've got a couple of years to work through, how do we properly define and measure better than we do at the minute, being honest and transparent, the benefits and the value that is being realized. But by the end of that 2-year period, the NDR will become our national data fabric for our system architecture. There's not going to be a test against those benefits as to whether to turn off the NDR or not. The NDR will be mainlined into everything, and we will have moved, several of our existing core, let's call them data resources and data feeds, into the NDR platform. So the ambition is really clear. There's no, we have to be wholeheartedly committed, and I think government understand that, even though formally the funding approval is only for 2 years. It's a lack of clarity about future funding, not a question about whether it will come to a dead stop. It can't really, but it's something that we need to be very conscious of.
Thanks, Ivan. Helen.
I think that comes out strongly in the case, doesn't it? And what the board themselves have been working through in the team under Rebecca Cook's directorship, really. This phase is very much about working out what the transition to service is for the national data resource and how we'll operate and what that looks like in terms of the sustainable funding that's required. And then we need to work out how we achieve that level of funding to ensure that it can be as successful as we know it needs to be and can be. But as Ivan said, having made the significant investment for Wales, and actually it's already attracting the fact that we've got the National Data Resource Programme, the fact that it's going to give us those opportunities. We're already attracting quite significant additional kind of research funding into Wales on the back of the ambition that we've got, really, and the approach that we're taking in Wales. So I think that we do need to focus more on the benefits, and I think that's a key focus for us, and the value that's being delivered across all of the work that we do in DHCW. We acknowledge that, and that's a key focus for us moving forward now for this year.
Thanks, Ivan. You may not be able to answer this question off the top of your head, but in terms of our vision to become world leading, when we get to a point in the NDR program of not an end point, but you know what I mean, where does that put us in the health systems in the world in terms of a sort of having a national data resource that can be used for all sorts of things? Will that put us mid-table, top table, or?
So I think, as a national health system, so there are some organizations that have got the benefit of being very tightly organized. So if you look maybe at the Veterans Association in the States, for example, some of the hospital systems, they will have a tightly integrated data platform, and they'll have visibility of what's within their own system, but they're not whole population coverage systems. They're selective, and sometimes they're subscription. So if we were to compare with national systems, I think we're going to be up there. If we manage to extend, and this is our ambition, if we manage to extend the national data resource beyond hospital boundaries to include social care, community care, and even a degree of user provided or patient and public provided data, then I think we're absolutely up there in the top rank. There are some things that we have already which are they would be world leading, right? In the sense that I could more than happily, and Ridian does very happily, stand on stages internationally to talk about our single enterprise master patient index, the visibility of reports across our system, across organizational boundaries, things like large nursing care record passing from one place to the next. I think, my only hesitation in that space is that the tooling, the engineering, the data engineering and the system architecture and the infrastructure and platforms behind those are not as cutting edge modern as perhaps they need to be. And that for me is the thing that the NDR is going to change. It's going to move us on to a proper, a proper modern data architecture, and then we can build off that. It's a very exciting 2 years that we've got ahead of us, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ivan. I'm sure everyone is happy to note your report and the business case. Thanks, Ivan. Thanks a lot. So with that, we'll break for lunch, and we will come back at just a minute before 1:30, if possible, because we're being joined by the Audit Wales team, so they will have a specific time that it's certainly Darren who's joining us. So see you at about 29 minutes past 1. Have a good break, everyone. we're just waiting for Darren, I think. Hopefully I'll be able to see. I can't, there's so many of us. Nathan's with us, but Darren isn't yet. There's Nathan.
Darren should be
Darren's
logging
on
in.
an
He should be logging in any
time.
minute. He does know that it starts 1:30, so he should be here any minute.
Ah, he's joining. He was there briefly. I won't kick us off until Darren's managed to get joined, Nathan.
I think he has joined.
I'm here, Chair.
You're here. I can't quite. Oh, can't see you yet. I don't think. Anyway, okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch break. And we'll move into part 5 of the agenda: governance, risk, performance, and assurance. And a first for us, which is our colleagues, our friends in Audit Wales, reporting on the first structured assessment report and the second, the annual audit report. But we very much welcome and look forward to hearing this. And I'm going to hand over, I think, do I hand over to you, Darren, first, is it, or it's to Darren first, and then I'll leave it in your hands to take us through the next item on the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be delivering our presentation in Welsh, and Nathan will be taking you through the annual audit report afterwards. So I'll be delivering the presentation in Welsh. So I just need to change my settings. There we go.
So good afternoon, and thanks very much to you for the invitation to attend this board meeting today to present the conclusions and findings of the first structured assessment for DHCW. I'll be giving you an overview of the main conclusions and findings, and my colleague Nathan will give an overview then of the annual audit report. Next slide, please. So we undertake this work in order to help to discharge the statutory requirements of the Auditor General to be satisfied that bodies within the National Health Service in Wales have made proper arrangements to secure economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in their use of resources. This is a statutory requirement under Section 61 of the Public Audit Wales Act 2004. In 2022, we focused on 4 areas, namely governance arrangements, strategic planning arrangements, arrangements for managing financial resources, and arrangements for managing other resources, such as the workforce, the estate, and digital resources. Next slide, please. The main conclusion of our work at the DHCW was that the authority embedded good governance arrangements, but that the authority now needs to seek to further develop its role as a trusted digital partner to exploit digitally enabled service opportunities across the whole of Wales. So that was the overall conclusion from our work. Next slide, please. In terms of governance arrangements, then, we found that the authority is well led and that it's made positive progress in terms of establishing and embedding appropriate arrangements to support good governance. We saw evidence that the authority embeds good and transparent governance arrangements. We found that the structure of the authority, which is evolving, supports good governance, despite there being some delay in appointment to some senior roles. And we also found that the authority has assurance systems that are generally effective and that continue to strengthen and evolve. Next slide, please. In terms of strategic planning arrangements, we found that the authority has effective planning approaches, but that further work is required to develop its longer term strategy and to include milestones and targets in some plans in order to facilitate effective progress monitoring. We found that the integrated medium term plan for 2022 to 25 gives a clear outline of DHCW's vision and strategic objectives in the short to medium term. However, the authority now needs to accelerate the work on developing its long-term strategy. We saw evidence that DHCW has a good approach towards planning and that its arrangements for engaging and stakeholders continue to strengthen. The corporate strategies and plans for DHCW include clear objectives, but there's a lack of target milestones in certain areas that inhibit effective monitoring. Next slide, please. In terms of arrangements then for managing financial resources, we found that DHCW has a generally effective approach to financial planning, monitoring and reporting. However, the funding model the organisation has poses risks that needs to be actively managed in the medium to long term. DHCW achieved its financial objectives for the financial year 21-22, and it forecasts a break-even position for 2022-23. Whilst it generally has effective financial planning arrangements in place, the funding model for its digital priorities investment and reliance on non-recurrent savings pose a risk. We saw evidence that DHCW has generally effective financial controls in place, and we also saw evidence of good financial scrutiny among board members, but that reporting on medium to long-term savings programs needs to be strengthened. Next slide, please. In terms then of arrangements for managing other resources, we found that DHCW has a good commitment to supporting staff wellbeing and good strategic approaches in place for managing its digital resources and the estates. However, its arrangements for managing physical assets require strengthening. DHCW's arrangements give the board some assurance that staff wellbeing is being adequately supported. However, risks around staff vacancies need to be well managed to ensure that this does not negatively impact the wellbeing of existing staff and that doesn't pose a service delivery hurdle. The DHCW short to medium term digital strategy is clearly captured in the IMTP. But more focus is needed on monitoring and reporting and on reporting benefits realisation on digital project portfolios. DHCW also has a good strategic approach towards estates management and decarbonisation, but action is required to strengthen board assurance on the management of physical assets. Next slide, please. So that gives you an overview of the principal findings and conclusions of our work within the DHCW last year. We've made 3 recommendations relating to strengthening strategic planning arrangements, strengthening arrangements on financial risk management, and strengthening arrangements for board assurance that physical assets are well managed. So I'd like also to conclude then by thanking you for your willing collaboration and to pay particular thanks to Chris and Laura for their support and their full cooperation throughout this work. We're extremely grateful to them for their cooperation and their support that was very forthcoming. Before moving on to presenting the annual audit report, would you like me to answer any questions on this report now, Chair?
Diolch, Darren, whichever suits you best. Yes, but let's keep them discreet because it makes a degree of sense, doesn't it, to do that. Who have we got? David, and then Ivan.
Thanks for the report. Could you just say a little bit more around the need to strengthen management of physical assets? Just expand a little bit on that in terms of the scope and what we might need to do.
Yes, of course. So the recommendation relates to a particular situation that arose within DHCW last year, where we were aware there were some weaknesses in the way oversight was provided of digital assets. So from our perspective, we identified an opportunity to strengthen, to kind of learn from that situation and to strengthen some of the assurances provided to the board that the physical resources are being managed adequately and appropriately. So it's building on some of the work internal audit undertook last year and strengthening some of the assurances provided to board in respect of physical assets.
Thanks, Darren.
Good. Ivan?
Thanks, Simon. Thank you, Darren. So a question I have about the recommendation that firm targets are needed for all strategies and in all plans, as in the previous item around the product method of operation. If we move a data center, then of course that is our method of working. But as we move to a flexible and agile way of working, this agile digital delivery method, it's far more difficult to set firm targets because that's not the essence of the product mode of working. So do you have any experience or comments that you could make in terms of Audit Wales's position as to how we should take that? Thanks, Ivan. I think that this is actually a fair enough comment, and strategic planning arrangements for the organization have to develop and adapt in accordance with the model that you're operating within. In terms of our perspective, what we would recommend is that you identify milestones that are quite robust and firm within the model that you've just described, accepting that there is an element of flexibility within that, and that they then can be used as a guideline for this work, because the board and board committees have a very important role to play in terms of monitoring and assessing progress. So some degree of benchmark is needed within the plans and strategies to permit the board and the committees to receive an assurance that the plans and strategies are operating and implementing what they seek to deliver. So I'm very happy to discuss this outside the meeting with you in order to make sure that you can respond to the recommendation in a practical and pragmatic way.
Thank you, Darren. Marion and then Chris. And then we'll perhaps move on to the second half of your agenda item.
Thank you, Chair. I was eager to inform the board that we have discussed the structured assessment, if I can get the words out, structured assessment in the last meeting of the audit committee. It is a positive report, and I think it reflects our growing maturity as an organization. This is the first structured assessment, and it's an evolution, of course, of the baseline governance report on our organization during the first year of our existence. And I'm very grateful to Darren for summarizing the principal conclusions and findings, and also for doing that, if I may say, Darren, in Welsh. As chair of the planning working group, it's encouraging to have this external assurance that our organization, our governance is transparent and of good quality, as you've heard earlier, that our assurance systems are effective, that there are financial planning measures in place that are effective, and that our financial regularity is also effective. There are a number of recommendations, as you've heard, and we as a committee will be keeping an eye on the actions in ensuring that they are fulfilled. And I very much look forward to seeing us as an organisation strengthening and maturing further over the coming months and year. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It builds on Marion's point, actually. I think just to acknowledge we are a new organisation, and how helpful both the baseline governance review and this structured assessment following up from the baseline governance review has been, because you can see the continuity across the two reports across the 2 years. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point was around the formal recommendations. There are 3 formal recommendations. One relates to the physical assets that David asked about, which will be monitored through Audit Committee. But what we have done, myself, Laura and others have discussed with Nathan and Darren opportunities for improvement from the report. So as well as the formal recommendations, there are a number of opportunities we've discussed to try and continue to learn, grow, improve as an organisation, which won't be tracked in the same way formally, but we're really keen to make sure we move forward because some of them do build on the 2 reports based on governance review and this one. So we will be doing that in addition to the formal reports. And just my thanks to Darren and Nathan.
Thank you, Chris. Back to you, Darren and Nathan, to obviously follow up on any of those comments if you wish, but I'll move on to the annual audit report if you wish as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy for us to move on to the annual audit reports, which Nathan will talk to you about.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. So our annual audit report can be accessed via a link within the Structured Assessment Cover Report at paragraph 3.4. And considering Darren's presentation on structured assessment, this will be a very quick update from myself, as the annual report does rely heavily on that particular piece of work. So I'm pleased to present the annual audit report to the board for noting. The report was also considered by Audit and Assurance Committee back in February. The report summarises the findings from the Auditor General's 2022 work at DHCW, and this fulfills his responsibilities under the Public Audit Wales Act 2004. So the findings within the report fall under 2 main headings. That's audit of accounts and arrangements for securing economy, efficiency, effectiveness in the use of resources. In terms of the key messages from the work, the Auditor General issued an unqualified audit opinion on the preparation, accuracy and the regularity of the financial transactions within DHCW's 2021-22 accounts. The review of the IT environment and application controls applied to national systems hosted by DHCW and used by other NHS organisations in Wales provide assurance that financial values produced by the systems for 21-22 were likely to be free from material misstatement, although some controls could be strengthened. And in relation to the programme of performance audit work, the Auditor General concluded that DHCW is embedding good governance arrangements and must now seek to further develop its role as a trusted digital partner to exploit digitally enabled service opportunities across Wales. And that concludes my presentation on the annual audit report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Has anyone got any questions or observations? Claire.
I just would like to thank Welsh Audit Office actually for their support during our first year at DHCW. I think we were learning as we went, and we worked alongside each other, taking on each other's advice, which I personally really appreciated, but I know my team did as well. And I think that's set us in good stead actually as we start this year's statutory accounts exercise, working along the same principles of transparency and openness in terms of the approach that we take and the learnings that we both make actually, I think, in that process in the digital environment. So I was delighted with our first set of unqualified accounts, and I look forward to setting the standard and keeping up that standard going forward. So thanks both to Nathan and Darren in supporting us during our first year and working closely with us as we move forward. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Claire. And we'll be delighted when we get the second set of unqualified accounts. Darren, Nathan, thank you very much for all your work with us and on behalf of us over the past year. I mean, it is really a great example of constructive challenge and having a critical friend, and people have said around the table how helpful and useful it's been, particularly as a new and young organization. So thank you very much for all that, and I hope we continue to not give you headaches, which is where we want to be, and I'm sure where you want us to be. So thank you very much for all your efforts on our behalf and being with us this afternoon. Down, you're probably leaving us. Nathan, you're probably going to endure the rest of the meeting as well, I should think, because you're observing, aren't you? Okay. Well, we receive that report for assurance in terms of formal minuting sense. So if we move on then to item 5.2, now many, if not all of you, will have read the Audit Wales report around Betsy Cadwallader, which came out at just last week of February, I think it was, and the issues and the fallout from that report and other issues. What I wanted us to do, and what I asked Chris to do, was to go through that report. And I'll hand over to you in a minute, Chris, and pick out the key themes, and then test where we are against those key themes. Not in no way to comment on the Audit Wales report and Betsy, that's not our place, but really just to identify whether there are any areas where we needed to do further work to ensure that we could assure ourselves that we were on the right track in the context of those key themes identified in the report. Chris, over to you to I mean, not take us through in detail point by point, but it's there, but you might want to pick out some of the particularly important issues for us.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I will just pick out some key areas for us to consider. As you said, the report was published on the 23rd of February, and I think since then there has been consideration by the All Wales Chairs Group, discussion with the All Wales Board Secretaries Network, and we have fed back to the NHS Confederation our individual organisations' positions against the themes set out within the report. So, as Simon mentioned, I've done a bit of extra work based on Simon's request to do an assessment of where we're at against those themes, in particular to pick out learning, potential areas for improvement, and any ongoing considerations for us as a board. I won't go through each of the areas, but section 3 of the report, I have tried to go through each of the Audit Wales headings from that report, and include a DHCW response or an assessment against each area. What I will do, though, is just make a few observations now from a DHCW perspective. So the report looked in a bit of detail at the executive team and how that was functioning. So I think the first point I would make is the DHCW executive team has only very recently been fully appointed to. So I think Sam Lloyd joined in January. And so that has taken not far off 2 years for us to get to a fully recruited to exec team. Likewise, from an independent member perspective, we have had a bit of change, particularly this year. We've had 2 new independent members join. So we are now a fully established board. And I think the report provides a really useful reminder of the importance of investing time in board development and ensuring, board cohesion, team development via some dedicated time towards OD work. So we have commissioned Deloitte to work with us over the next year and beyond, potentially, on a board development program that started for us in October last year. A big focus of that work with Deloitte is around getting the right balance between challenge, cohesion, and trust amongst board members. And I think those were all key themes that came out of the Audit Wales report. As mentioned, that board development programme will certainly run until October this year, and there is the option to extend that should we wish as a board to continue that work. In terms of ongoing considerations, and I think just areas for us to focus on, it probably builds on the structured assessment feedback. I think, firstly is working relationships between independent members and the executive team, and ensuring that those relationships are based on trust, respect, and constructive challenge. A cohesive executive team, and one that's very clear on their roles and responsibilities. I think that's something we need to be, continue to be clear on moving forward. A collectively agreed position on our risk appetite as a board, the level of risk we're willing to accept and what our risk tolerance is. Succession planning came through, and I think that's important for us. Succession planning, talent management, and leadership development. And finally, the area I'd pick out is just ensuring we continue to drive our long-term strategy this year. I think that's a really important aspect of that report. So the The report's in the pack. It's there for assurance, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. You're on mute, Simon.
Got to do it once. Sorry, thank you for that, Chris. Any questions or comments? I mean, I think it was a very useful, well, more than an exercise to go through to give us that assurance that we, and then to clearly to focus our minds on those areas where we still need to do, potentially do need to do some work. Ruth.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chris. I think it's a useful exercise. I'd agree. I mean, I think the one thing I would say is that we shouldn't rest on our laurels almost by saying we've done some of these things, because you know, I think it was very clear from the Audit Wales report that our colleagues in Betsy had also done some of these things. So I think we need to constantly challenge ourselves as to what we are doing and why we are doing it when we're doing things like board development. And actually things like that can't fix deep-seated underlying problems, but actually what we need to be recognizing is what is it we're trying to build on. So I think we're in a very different position from that respect, but I don't think we can take our eye off the ball on these things. I think we have to just keep challenging ourselves around this.
Oh, absolutely, Ruth. I mean, Helen and myself had a conversation with Audit Wales about next year's work plan, and we've had a clutch of very, very well, I mean, fantastic audit reports, both internal and external, but I think we very much made the point that we can't rest on our laurels. You come off the rails a lot faster than you get back on the rails.
There is such a thing as too much good news.
Yeah, well, I don't know. But yes, I think that it's a point well made, Ruth, and it's why we constantly need to be testing ourselves and not getting in any way complacent. Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. We'll receive the report as we did the previous two reports for assurance. And if I move on then to item 5.3, the integrated organizational performance report, and I'll hand over to Ivan, who will be introducing this item. Ivan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Simon. Me again, sorry. So members will be familiar with the integrated performance report. We bring it to every board meeting, so 6 times a year, but we also, following every full quarter, we present an integrated report which has additional information in it, including our portfolios, our projects, our programs, and other such things. Today's presentation, the one you have in front of you today, is one of the smaller ones, which is on performance, but we have added 1 page which anticipates where we expect to be by the end of the year, and I'll come back to that in a moment. As you're aware, and it's for discussion, so I'd welcome any questions or comments at the end of the presentation, which will be brief. Our emphasis throughout the year has been on evolving the report in order to try to reach a stable and familiar pattern. I think we've completed that, or we've achieved that. You will all hopefully be able to read the report quite simply because you have seen a report that looks like this before, and that will assist you in turning your attention to the areas that you have particular interest in. And if I need to call in other executive directors, I'll be able to do that. You'll know that we focused on planning quite a lot. The IMTP has been presented today over the past few months. Over the coming months, I think we want to look at performance and how we report on performance. And we started that discussion with a day with our senior leaders about 3 weeks or so ago. Not that there's anything wrong with the integrated performance report as it currently stands, but we have the ambition of being an organization which is internationally leading, so we need to push ourselves. And particularly, I think we want to look at some of the things that David, for example, has mentioned, namely how we measure the value of what we deliver and other such things. How can we reflect that in the report? So we'll be looking at that over the coming months. I'd like to turn to one particular page, which is a page plan on a page, interim plan on a page, and put some focus on the word interim. What we're doing here is trying to anticipate where we think we will conclude at the end of the year, which is the midnight tomorrow night. A formal report will come to you in April, which will be the full performance report with all the level of detail around our programmes. And there's quite a lot of this page, which you can see is green. That doesn't mean that everything is green across the organisation. So 2 things I want to outline. One is that this is an interim document, a draft, to anticipate where we will be. And secondly, what's on the plan on a page document really is our main ambition for the year. So it's not all plans that we have, but the things that are most important to us. And because of that, I think shouldn't be too much of a surprise to see most of this page green, because these are the things that we've prioritised over other things. That's why they are on the plan on the page. So where they are green, we've delivered them in the year. Where they are grey, we anticipate that we will have delivered them during the year. And where they are red, we have not yet closed them. And you'll remember the last meeting on WCCIS, for example, around the future roadmap for WCCIS, we discussed that. It is possible that we will complete that as well before the end of the year. So we're trying to give an idea here, because we've discussed the IMTP today, as to where we think we are at against the plan throughout the year and what our main highlights are. But we will be discussing this in more detail in a month's time when the year has concluded. So I don't want to draw attention to anything specific. There are a number of things in the report that are amber and so forth, but presented in a way which is familiar to you. So if you have any questions at all, I or one of the other directors would be very happy to take those questions and comment on that.
Thank you, Even Diolch. Any questions or comments on the... I'm glad you told me what grey was, because I couldn't work it out. I didn't recognise grey in a red, amber, green. Anyone? No? Well, thank you very much. So we receive that report and move on to item 5.4, the corporate risk register, and I'll ask Chris to introduce this item. Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to start by drawing board members' attention to item 5.4i, the risk and board assurance forward work plan. So we're in the process of reviewing our risk appetite as a board. We had a session at the last board development day to run through this, and we've got time with executives over the next month or 2. So we will be bringing back to the May board meeting a revised or updated risk appetite position, along with our board assurance framework report for 2023-24. Moving on from that, I want to note the World Economic Forum Long-Term Global Risks Landscape report for 2023 that's been published. The link is set out within the paper. And we did talk about this also at the last board development day, but there's a number of key points that are very relevant to DHCW that I think are worth noting. And this obviously is from an international perspective, but widespread cybercrime and cyber insecurity features in both the 2-year and 10-year top 10 global risks by severity of impact. And there's a new chapter for the 2023 report, Digital Rights, Privacy in Peril. So I would encourage board members just to have a look through that. The section highlights the significant opportunities and benefits over the next decade based on use of new technology, AI, and driving value from data to improve and address backlogs in healthcare settings. But it also highlights the associated threats from new technology and making greater use of data, particularly around inequality, digital inclusion, abuse of digital privacy, and ongoing cyber threats. So just a few things I think are really relevant and helpful for us in the context of considering risk for the organisation. Moving to the DHCW risk position, before I go through our current position, I just want to summarise what was in the IMTP that Ivan took us through earlier from a risk perspective. They've done risk by themes. There's 7 themes that I think reflect well our position as we go into next financial year. So cyber being top of that list, suppliers, so supplier capacity and the ability to deliver, digital inflation, sustainable funding, resourcing and filling key posts, legacy issues and infrastructure, and complex interdependency, so digital system integration. So those were the 7 areas that we've included within the IMTP from a risk perspective. Just moving on to talk through the current corporate risk register position, which I think reflects those themes. But there's 31 risks on the corporate risk register, 20 of which are included within the papers today. There are a number that are private risks, the majority cyber related, that are considered by the Digital Governance and Safety Committee in private session. So I'm asking board members to note the changes in the risk position and profile since the last meeting. So there's 15 new risks that have gone on. So there's a significant number of new risks that have been added to the risk register. 9 are financial related risks, so more granular. But I think Claire's keen to be clear on the mitigation that's mitigating each of those new individual risks, so we can be clear as and when they're mitigated and removed from the risk register. In addition to those 15 new risks, 7 risks have been removed from the risk register since we last met as a board. And there's 2 risks where there's been changes in risk scores. So one where there's been an increase, so I'll start with that. Supply capacity to support the electronic prescription service, that's gone from a score of 12 to 20. So Ivan is a risk owner for that risk. Ivan, do you want to comment on that increase in score?
Yeah, I think it's a risk which has turned into an issue, and so the likelihood has sort of materialized to some extent. We're mitigating it, and the situation is that we've got quite a complex set of dependencies for electronic prescribing services. We plug into the NHS spine in England. NHS are upgrading some of the standards that are in that space. They're working with third-party suppliers. We use the third-party suppliers into our systems. So there's quite a complex interacting of those, and there have been some hiccups in different parts of that supply chain, let's call it, or technical supply chain, over the last couple of months, which is knocking us back by a couple of weeks here, or an unexpected few weeks there. So we're not. It's not a risk that we will not have an electronic prescription service, but there are glitches and bumps in the road and other things, as there often are, and they've materialized as we anticipated they might, which is why the score has gone up. Hopefully we'll get over those bumps and then the score can come down.
Thanks, Ivan. The second change in risk scores around staff vacancies. So a lot of work has been done in this area by Sarah Jane and the team. I think they've had daily stand-ups to review the position. That's gone from a 16 to a 12. There was a deep dive into this particular risk at the last audit and assurance committee, and the slight decrease, it's still on there as a corporate risk, but the slight decrease I think represents some of the work that's taken place to help mitigate that. In terms of our highest scoring risks, just to summarize, so supplier capacity to support EPS, as Ivan's just outlined, Link remains on there as our joint highest scoring risk. We had the private board session prior to this, so I think board members will be aware of the position there. And the final one that's now in that top scoring risk is the NHS Wales SLA income increases, which Claire highlighted during the finance report earlier. So those are the 3 highest scoring risks at the moment. Although there's a significant number of new risks, I don't think our risk profile position has changed significantly. It's still dominated by financial and cyber related risks. So that continues to be the case. And there has been a lot of movement. I would hope and expect a number of those risks will come off or be mitigated down between now and the next board meeting in May, because there is a larger number than usual. I'll conclude there, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Anyone got questions or comments on any of the issues that Chris has raised? No, if we're... Oh, go on, Ivan.
I've got one comment, and don't relax, Chris. It's not one that I've floated past Chris before. Behind the scenes, underneath this risk register, we've done a lot of work across the organisation to, especially in my area, to bring programme and project risks onto our consolidated DATIX risk management system, and those risks are scored from a programme and a project perspective. And the impact on the delivery of a program or a project might be very, very significant in that context, so they score highly. But for us as a whole organization, perhaps the impact is not of the same, sort of weight. So I just wanted to comment to say that, to reassure independent members and the board that we are trying to bring, and we are actively managing risks in there are hundreds of risks, and we're trying to manage them all. But as we go into the whole area of program and project governance and how that overlaps with DHCW's organizational corporate governance, simple scoring is maybe not giving us quite the sophistication that we need to differentiate between things that are a corporate risk and things that are a program or a project risk, because they may well be very significant risks in a project context, but not so much in the corporate. And what's driving me to that is we've got 31 risks on our corporate risk register. It's quite a high number, quite difficult to manage. So I'm sure this is something that we'll all engage with over the next 6 to 9 months.
Do you want to come back on that, Chris?
No, I think Ivan's right. I think the program governance and the management of risks through programs is something we'll need to monitor. And I agree in terms of number on the corporate risk register. I'm slightly uncomfortable. I don't want it to go up, because I do think you start to lose the wood for the trees once you get beyond, circa 30. It's probably the highest we've had over the last 2 years or so. So I think it's a good point. That said, I do think there are a number of risks that we've actively broken down to be clear on mitigations that we know and we think will be mitigated over the coming months. So I think it's an area we should just keep an eye on.
Ruth.
And just follow up on that, as an organisation, we're in the riskiest environment we've ever been in compared to 2 years ago. And I think certainly when we had the discussion around finances at the last audit board, we felt that, almost a blanket finance risk and funding risk didn't accurately capture all of the separate moving parts, all of the work that we're doing, and what the impact is of things that are out with our control within the funding model. So, I think it is a lot, but we're facing a lot. And I think that has to be recognised. And I would imagine that we would therefore be able to hopefully move some of those off soon when we deliver some of the mitigating action, or it crystallises and it's actually happened. It's probably 50-50 on some of those at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Rowan.
And just really to reinforce what Ruth said, we've seen exactly the same in DG&S, where we had a block of cyber risk that we've split in order to track through mitigations, and the focus has driven choices in terms of our priorities in this year's forthcoming budget. Claire, thank you for recognising and supporting that investment. And to this point, it's not just the fact we've got a war on the edge of Europe between Ukraine and Russia. Technology advances like ChatGPT is already having an impact in terms of driving up cyber risk, because those old tells that you could kind of train people to read in phishing emails are being eroded, because the large language models are really writing beautiful email and it looks even more genuine. So the risks are going up all the time for us.
Thank you, Rowan. Yes, I mean, I know you're across this, Chris. I mean, it's a balance, isn't it, between breaking them down so that you can focus but not ending up with too many, and we just need to make sure that we get that balance right. Okay, so people happy to receive the corporate risk register? Yes, thank you. If we move on to the next item, which is the item 5.5, we're moving into the reports from the various committees since the last public board meeting. The first one is down to me, the Remuneration and Terms of Services Committee, and nothing really to add to what you've got in front of you. I'll just highlight that the main item of business was the receiving an update on executive team performance, and myself going through with non-executive with independent members an update on the chief executive's performance. And I'm happy to say that it was a happy meeting, which is probably all I should say, but it's where you want it to be. So you happy to note the contents of that report, of the report of that meeting? Thank you. Moving then on to Local Partnership Forum, who was in the chair? It was Andrew. Andrew's in the chair for this one. So over to you, Andrew, if you'd like to highlight anything in particular from the report.
Yes, again, I mean, there's nothing specific to highlight. It's all in the report, really. Just to just to draw members' attention really to the link between the hybrid working and the estates plan and the work that we're doing behind around that in the background. There's nothing specific to bring to board at this moment in time. Also, just to note that we successfully transferred Lincoln RISP over to Digital Health and Care Wales. So those are the only things really just to give attention to. Everything else pretty much is as written. But if anybody has any questions, I would be glad to answer.
Any questions or observations? If not, are people happy to note that contents of that report? Thank you. And then we move on to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee highlight report, which will be Rowan.
Thank you, Chair. I know all the members of the board will have read the report. I think it's very straightforward. The key risks and issues that I need to draw to the attention of the board are highlighted in 5 bullet points. So I'm sure you will have grasped those. So the only thing I would want to add really is to thank Ridian for his continued support in driving the agenda with me, and actually the open way in which everyone comes to the meetings and reports and discusses the challenges that they're managing and facing. That's makes a difficult task very rewarding. So thank everyone for that, and the continued support of all the employees in attending to managing their responsibilities in respect of cyber. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rowan. Any questions or comments? Happy to note the contents of that report. Yeah, great. And then moving on to the Audit Assurance and Assurance Committee highlight report. And that's over to you, Marion.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing in particular to draw to your attention, but perhaps could I just underline the 4 audit reports that came before us as a committee. One on financial sustainability, the strategy on engagement, performance management, and the switching service. Those 4 audits received a reasonable assurance rating, and I think that outlines the findings of the structured review that came before the board a little earlier today. So they are all positive reports. And can I also, before concluding, express my appreciation of the commitment that we received from the Deputy Chief Executive and Finance Director, Claire Osmondson-Little, and also the commitment of the governance team that is key, of course, to supporting this committee and ensuring that we do deliver within our remit. Thank you.
Thank you, Diolch, Marion. Any questions or comments? Just one thing I'll mention at this point, because I do have a regular conversation with both the chairs of all of the 3 committees, Local Partnership Forum and the Audit and Assurance Committee and the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, and having a conversation with Marion and with Rowan, we thought it would be useful. This doesn't set up a formal committee in any sense whatsoever, but we need to work out the regularity to bring those 2 committees together to have an informal conversation around risks that are jointly, in a sense, owned by the 2 committees. And Chris and I are thinking probably 6 monthly at most we'd need to do that, and then that would come, I think a report from that would come through in the chair's report. I think we thought we'd do it rather, so we're not setting up any new lines of assurance, but just the opportunity for those 2 committees to come together and think, are we making sure that nothing falls between the gaps between our joint responsibilities? So we're working out when we do that, and I think Marion's suggestion was around about using the hook of the audit, the annual report and the annual accounts would be a potentially sensible time to do that. So thank you very much for that. And we move on then to any other urgent business. I've had nothing. Oh, Alistair.
Sorry, Chair. It was just on the last item. I was just trying to come in. It's really just we've considered a number of reports. We've noted them, and it's great to see so many that are positive. If we link that to what we were discussing earlier about developing the culture, and engaging our staff. I'm just interested to the extent that we are cascading key messages coming out of these reports through our workforce where we believe it's appropriate. Now, I just thought it might be useful just to have a quick word from Sarah Jane or whoever on just that very issue. Seems to me that we've got one half that's, you know, two halves that we need to connect together, and I'm sure we are, but I'd just like some reassurance on that, please.
Yeah, good point. I don't know whether Sarah Jane wants to pick that up. Oh, Helen's coming in first, and then Chris.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm sure, yeah, Chris and Claire, I'll probably inadequately seal that, and but we log all of the recommendations and the findings and the actions that we're taking forward from any of the audit and review kind of assessments that we have through our, you know, we've got something called a QUILE, which is a, you know, a system that we've got in place that we manage through our quality arrangements, our quality management arrangements. So I'll stop there because I've got less detail than my colleagues on that, but just to rest assured that we got a central place where that is considered through the quality board and our quality management systems, so that we're sharing that and actively managing it.
So I come in next, if that's
I
all
don't
right,
mind.
Chair.
Yes, if go on, because
It's just that actually the interesting thing about the audit actions is because the audits were very much back-end loaded, our audit actions have grown quite a lot. I think they're now over 50, 53, I think they were in the last audit committee. And we do track those, as Helen said, through the QUILE, but actually the actions are allocated to across the organisation, obviously depending on where the audit is. And we do report those, or we have reported them regularly through our exec team. So there is visibility of it. What I think is an observation is if you look at our audit, our agenda today, we looked at BCU and the issues around constructive, challenge, learning. I would say that our chair, Marion, creates the right atmosphere in that board. So we do cover a broad range of subjects. And we do challenge ourselves, and we are challenged as to our responses, our response times, and our ability to deal with that. And we also challenge ourselves. So in the audits we've seen today, for example, we talked about the security around our assets. So we voluntarily asked internal audit to take a view as to the quality of our internal asset controls, and they came back with a number of recommendations. And again, through the audit committee, we track the completion of those to address those issues, to address those various issues. So my reflection would be is that I am confident actually that we've established the right atmosphere, and we include the right agenda items and the right participation from DHCW in those agenda items to address some of those issues, but in a way that if there are areas of weakness, we learn from them and we try and do and try and improve on those in a timely manner, and we monitor the improvement of it. So we're always willing to learn more, but it gives me reassurance, actually, having read the BCU position, that actually we've created an environment that will be to the benefit of DHCW. So yeah.
Chris, I want to come back to you, Alison.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, and just to build on that point about recommendations, I think Ruth's always challenged us in audit committee to not just provide management responses, but to take the learning and try and, you know, develop themes from the learning. So that is something that I have to say is very challenging to do, but very useful to have that challenge back to us to make sure we're not just looking at things in isolation. But my comment was actually more on the communicating back to staff, I think, point that Alistair raised.
Right, that's what I was going to make, yeah.
There's a few things I think we've done, but I think it's a really good point to raise because it's something that you can probably always do more of. In terms of communications back from board meetings, there's a summary video that goes out to staff from a board member. I think Claire's doing it after this board meeting, that we try and promote to within 5 minutes summarize what's a 3-hour meeting with the key points discussed, issues raised. We also have a board insights newsletter that goes out to staff and wider stakeholders actually of the work of the DHCW board. I think that's 2 monthly or quarterly. And then there's a couple of mechanisms that I think have been really effective within DHCW. So one is via the Tens Talk podcast, as it were. And I know Marilyn's been, I think a number of independent and executive members have got messages back out to the organisation that way. And our 6 weekly staff briefing that Helen fronts and leads for us from a chief exec perspective, we make sure we try and take any of the topical areas. So the most recent one, which was a couple of weeks ago, I think Ivan and Claire attended to talk through the IMTP position, what it means for us going into next year, and the financial position and the context within which we're working. So there are a number of mechanisms, Alistair, I think we have in place, but we have recently done a survey of staff about what the most effective or helpful way of communicating with them is, and we're going through and collating feedback just to try and make sure we are refining wherever we can to make sure we're as effective as possible.
Thanks for picking up on that. That's what I was going to come back to you, Alistair, because that's the question I heard you asking, or a bit of the question I heard you asking around how we're communicating what we're hearing back to the staff. Has that picked up on the points you raised, Alistair? Yeah, it's very helpful, and it's partly because I don't know that we've got this, but I suspect that we've got quite a lot in action. Chris has just touched on it in terms of staff surveys, but a lot of what we've just described or discussed is top down, and I just wonder, to the extent that we've got something that I might frame, Chris, as a continuous improvement program from our staff groups, from our workforce, that can inform us, and it can be a very vital part of being aware of what's not being communicated, being aware of what their experiences are in the work that they do, and that can really help to inform us internally. I did wonder whether we've got something like that in place that's dynamic and that we should be bringing reports into the board about. The LPF being one route, but Sarah Jane's very helpfully got her hand up, so she might be able to pick up on that, and then Marilyn, and then we'll move on. We'll close for the day.
Yeah, just a really, thank you, Chair. Just a quick point from me. So obviously we've got the LPF, and as Andrew said earlier, we have a number of informal meetings as well, which is really helpful. We've also got the Health and Wellbeing Group. We're just setting up the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Network. But I think it's probably worth to say we've got a staff conference on the 25th and the 26th of April actually coming up, Alistair, and that's going to go through a multitude of different things to discuss, people getting involved in that. And I wasn't here for last year's one, but obviously I'm here for this year's. But a lot of the learning and the feedback from last year actually really helped me and my team sort of shape and craft the OD and people strategy and some of the component parts within it. So it was a really inclusive piece of work. And obviously this year, a similar theme, really, a whole range of different things that are going to be talked through. But they're not going to be talked through by us. It's going to be staff members and more junior people actually communicating some of these key messages. So I think that will be a really good fora and really timely on the 25th and 26th of April to have a whole range of things worked through. And we will collate the information after that and take any key learning, any hotspots and feedback, and integrate that into our plans as we move forward. So that's a really good thing that this organisation does on an annual basis in a really joined up way.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. And Marilyn, you can have the pleasure of the last word.
Just following on from that, I just want to say that that's really good and really nice to know we're doing that. But I just wonder whether we could move that on to do it perhaps more regularly, not necessarily in that big way, but perhaps a quarterly thing, so people feel that it's more part of a journey than just once a year, because things move on quite quickly, don't they, in the SR field. And I just think I got this analogy I call shower B-day effect. So we're the shower basically, and we want a bit of the B-day coming up, the ground level staff. And if we meet in the middle, I know it's a pictorial thing, that's when the magic happens, but you know what I mean? But so, if we can think about doing that more regularly rather than once a year, I think that would really add to the things that we're all the groups we've already got in existence and the ones we're going to be starting, like the EDI group as well. So Diolch yn fawr, thank you for that.
Thanks, Marilyn. I'm sure you can pick that up, and Sarah Jane, happy to pick up and have those conversations. And now Helen's got a hand up, so I better not stop. Go on, Helen.
Yeah, apologies. Just to, I guess, some assurance. I think there's some, we can consider that, Marilyn, and have a conversation about how we would do that. I think the other thing to note is that we do regular 10 talks, and there are other kind of communication methods that we use to share things throughout the year to ensure that, you know, there's the opportunity to engage with things as they develop, you know, so developing thinking, developing strategy. I'm sure Ivan's going to have quite a lot of that going on, and Sam, actually, in terms of the engagement with the staff on some of the significant work that we're going to be doing in terms of strategy development, the shift to cloud and product, and all of the engagement that we need around that. So there'll be kind of active engagement through all the channels that we've got throughout the year, just to reassure board members on that.
I bet I had. Ruth.
It was just a final comment, Simon. I wonder whether we considered as a board whether we're the B-day or the shower.
I was hoping I hadn't heard properly. Okay, thank you all very much indeed, and thank you for leaving that image in our heads, Marilyn. The date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 25th of May, and this concludes the last meeting of what has been a successful year. It's had its challenges, and we know we've got much more to do, and there's some areas where we've got to run a bit faster. And next year is going to be is going to bring its fair share of new challenges. So thank you all for your contributions today. I wish you a very good rest of the day, and on that note, I'll say goodbye.